My father died without warning. A heart attack caught him at his desk. 58 years old, a lifetime of working himself to nothing, and his heart simply stopped. They got him to the hospital in time, but the doctors said at the moment he arrived, no chance. They let me in to say goodbye. He was lying under a drip, pale, lips the color of ash, but conscious. When I walked in, he tried to smile. Almost managed it. My father had always been a strong man. Hard, demanding, sometimes unfair, but strong. He looked at me for a long time, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't fear of death. It was something else. Worry. For me. Because I was his greatest disappointment. I'm 23, his only son, the heir he raised to take over the business. Instead, from the age of 18, I had done exactly one thing: spend his money. Theme parks, nightclubs, expensive restaurants, resort trips with friends who vanished the moment my wallet emptied. And above all, gambling. Poker, roulette, sports betting. I lost sums that would have kept an average family fed for years, then went back and lost more. My father paid off my debts 3 times. 3 times he tried to talk to me man to man. 3 times I nodded, promised to change, and within a week I was back at the card table. My mother died when I was 14. After that, he raised me alone. Something in that broke. Either the situation or me. Probably me. He lay in that hospital room and held out a folder with a trembling hand. I took it without understanding. He rasped, his voice barely working. 10 hectares. South of the city, by the highway. It's yours. Start something. A farm. An orchard. Anything. Just stop destroying yourself. 10 hectares. A good piece of land. He knew what he was doing. Flat, close to water, right off a main road. He believed, even at the end, that if he put something real in my hands I would change. That dirt and planting schedules would fix what his words never could. He died an hour after that conversation. I sat beside him and held his hand, for the first time in years. And for the first time in years I felt something close to shame. But shame doesn't last long. Not in people like me. Standing at the graveside in the gray morning light, I wasn't thinking about my father. I was thinking about the land. 10 hectares by a highway, conservatively $800,000, maybe $1 million with the right buyer. Farming? Me? Up at 5 in the morning, mud on my boots, counting crop yields? I'd be dead of boredom by day 3. No. Sell it, clear the debts, keep enough for 6 months of breathing room. And then, we'll see. Maybe I'd run the money up at poker and double it. I was already picturing the table while standing over my father's fresh grave. The friends, the ones who always disappeared when my money ran out, showed up again the moment word got around about the inheritance. Calls, messages, offers to toast his memory. I didn't say no. The night after the burial, I drank until I couldn't remember getting home. I just woke up face down on my bed, still dressed, with no idea how I got there. And then, in the middle of that same night, something woke me. Not a sound I recognized. Not an alarm. Something else, sharp, clean, metallic, like a bell struck directly inside my skull. I lurched upright, still half drunk, still not knowing where I was. And then a screen lit up in front of me. Not on the wall, not on the ceiling. In the air, directly at eye level, luminous, half transparent, like something out of the games I used to waste whole days on. Entertainment magnate system. Activated host. Confirmed starting location. Confirmed first objective. Raised $10 million for construction of the first casino. I stared at it and assumed I was having a breakdown. I passed my hand through the letters, felt nothing. The text didn't flicker. I was the one that felt unreal. Then the screen shifted. A hologram opened in front of me. A 3-dimensional map of a plot of land, rotating slowly. I recognized it immediately, even though I'd only seen it on paper. 10 hectares. His land. My land. But now it was overlaid with translucent outlines of structures, towers, pavilions, walkways, open plazas. A blueprint projected onto reality. Something enormous. I pinched myself. Nothing. I waited for it to fade. It didn't. The system waited with the patience of something that has no concept of hurry. And then, somewhere in my chest, something clicked. Fear and adrenaline arriving at the same moment. Because I understood, something genuinely interesting was happening. Something worth waking up for. A voice, not loud, not quiet, simply perfectly clear, spoke inside my head. The system. It explained the rules. The land my father left me wasn't going to become a farm. It was going to become entertainment. Casinos, arenas, hotels, restaurants, nightclubs, racetracks, everything that gives people pleasure and takes their money. Every completed building unlocks the next level. Every objective cleared brings rewards, technology, contacts, resources, capital. The end goal, turn 10 hectares of highway-adjacent farmland into the largest entertainment complex in the country. The system would help. Not do it for me, help. It knows which venues generate the most revenue by season. It knows which combinations of buildings amplify each other's returns. It has engineering blueprints, real ones, the kind architecture firms charge hundreds of thousands for. It will tell me exactly what to say in investor meetings. It will give me names, contractors, officials who can be persuaded, bankers willing to lend, designers, promoters, security firms. Everyone I'll need. And the first objective sat in front of me in clean, unblinking text. $10 million. For a casino. Me. The guy who yesterday was pricing up the land to clear his poker debts. The guy no bank in the country would let through the front door because my credit history looks like a list of war crimes. I sat on my wrecked bed, still in my funeral clothes, staring at the hologram of the plot my father gave me. For the first time in a very long time, I felt something other than boredom or the urge to play. I felt something turning on inside me. Something my father had probably spent his whole life trying to see in me and never got the chance. The land he left me for a farm was going to become something else entirely. He probably wouldn't have approved. Then again, who knows? What mattered was that I was finally going to build something, just on my terms. Somewhere at the edge of my mind, while the system hovered and waited for my first move, a thought surfaced. $10 million isn't that much. If you know who to talk to, what to say, and how to say it. I looked at the hologram. I looked at it for a long time. All right, I said to no one. Show me everything. The screen expanded. We got to work. The system gave me 3 names. Not a speech, not a motivational push. Just 3 names, 3 addresses, and 3 time slots, written in the air in front of me like a to-do list from something that had already run the numbers and simply needed me to show up. I looked at the first name for a long time. Hayato, 61 years old. My father's business partner for over 2 decades. I hadn't seen him since I was maybe 15, back when he still came to the house for New Year's dinners and looked at me the way adults look at a child they've already written off. The system's note next to his name was short. He will not give you money. Go anyway. That was either very honest or very stupid. I decided to find out which. Hayato's office was exactly what I expected from a man who'd spent 30 years building something real. Dark wood, no unnecessary furniture, a desk that probably cost more than my car. He looked up when I walked in and didn't stand. Kenji, not a greeting. A confirmation that he recognized me and wasn't particularly pleased about it. Mr. Hayato, I heard about your father. He paused. I was at the funeral. I know. Thank you for coming. Silence. He waited. I thought about this on the drive over. The system had given me an opening line, a full script, beats and pauses mapped out like a stage direction. I'd read it twice. Then I put my phone away and decided to start without it. I'm going to build a casino on the land he left me. Then a hotel. Then more. I need $10 million in 60 days to break ground. I'm not here to ask you for the money. He raised an eyebrow. Just barely. Then why are you here? Because you knew my father for 23 years, and your name still opens doors mine doesn't. I want a letter of introduction. 3 names, people you trust who might look at this seriously. Hayato leaned back. Looked at me the way you look at something you're trying to find the flaw in. Your father left you farmland. My father left me an asset. I'm choosing how to use it. He wanted you to settle down. Build something modest. Something responsible. He wanted me to build something. I kept my voice even. He didn't specify the square footage. Another silence. Longer this time. Hayato's fingers moved once against the desk, the only tell he had. You have no credit history worth mentioning. No track record. No partners. And you want me to put my name behind you. Not behind me. Next to the project. I opened my folder and slid a single page across the desk, the system's site overview, rendered clean, architectural. I have the engineering plans. I have the land. I have a specific ask and a specific timeline. That's more than most people walk in here with. He looked at the page. Didn't touch it. Read it where it lay. I watched his eyes move across the numbers and said nothing. Then the system spoke, quietly, just for me. Now, offer him the wing. There's one more thing, I said. The casino will have a private lounge, high-limit tables, separate entrance, invitation only. I want to name it Hayato Lounge. Your name on the door, permanently. 3% of that wing's net revenue, every month, for as long as the building stands. No investment required. Just the letter. He looked up from the page. I waited. Hayato picked up the sheet, finally, and studied it properly. When he set it down, his expression hadn't changed, but something behind it had. I'll write the letter, he said. 3 names. People who will at least take the meeting. What they decide is their business and yours. He stood, which meant the meeting was over. Don't embarrass your father's memory, Kenji. I don't intend to. I walked out with a letter of introduction and a permanent 3% liability I just invented on the spot. Cost, 3% of the lounge. Forever. Return, 3 doors that would otherwise stay closed. The system marked the first contact complete. 2 names remained on the list. The second name was Ruji. 44 years old. Owner of a nightclub chain. 6 venues across 3 cities. Mid to high-end. Good locations. Consistent revenue. The system's note was longer this time. His clubs are losing 15% of their core demographic annually. He knows it. He doesn't know what to do about it. Tell him the number. Don't explain it. Just say it. Let him fill in the rest. Ruji met me at one of his clubs, closed in the afternoon, staff setting up for the evening. He was younger looking than his age, sharp clothes, the kind of energy that fills a room without trying. He shook my hand like he'd already sized me up on the way across the floor. Hayato vouched for the meeting, he said, sitting down across from me. Not for you specifically. What are you selling? I'm not selling anything. I'm offering a position in a casino and entertainment complex, ground floor, pre-construction pricing. I put the plans on the table. $2 million for 12%. That's the number. But before you look at those, I want to tell you something about your business. He paused with his coffee halfway to his mouth. Your clubs will lose approximately 15% of their primary revenue demographic by 2027. The shift is already happening. You can see it in your Thursday and Friday early evening numbers if you look at the last 8 months against the year before. 10 seconds of silence. Ruji set his coffee down. Go on, he said. People with disposable income are consolidating their nights out. One destination, multiple experiences, dinner, gaming, a show, a drink, a hotel room if they feel like it. Standalone clubs are losing that customer to integrated venues. Not because your clubs are bad, because you're only one piece of an evening and they want the whole thing in one place. He was quiet for a moment. Then, and your complex gives them the whole thing. That's the plan. He picked up the site overview, looked at it properly, not the quick scan of someone being polite, but the real read of someone running the numbers in their head as they go. 12%, he said. 12. Timeline. Casino open in 14 months. Hotel 6 weeks after that. What's your fallback if the licensing gets complicated? The system fed me the answer before I'd finished processing the question. I said it without hesitation, specific enough to sound like I'd already planned for it, which, technically, I had. Ruji listened, nodded once, looked at the plans again. 2 million, he said finally. 12%. I want a clause. If the casino isn't operational within 20 months of signing, I have the right to exit at cost. 18 months. He thought about it. 19. Done. We shook hands across his own bar. Cost. 12% equity, 19-month exit clause. Return. $2 million in the account. The system updated, raised, $2 million remaining. $8 million days elapsed. 4 days remaining, 56. The third approach wasn't a meeting. It was a product. The system called it a founding membership program. 200 slots, $15,000 each. Buyers received a gold tier membership, permanent VIP access to every venue in the complex, priority booking, a founding member designation that would never be offered again once construction began. I looked at the math. 200 times $15,000 equals $3 million. I looked at it again. People will pay $15,000 for access to something that doesn't exist yet. The system's answer was immediate. The right people will. You're not selling a membership. You're selling the fact that they were first. Hayato's letter got me in front of 12 people in the right circles. Ruji, who by day 5 had clearly mentioned the project to several of his own contacts, generated 6 more. I did the pitch 18 times in 9 days. Same structure each time. The land, the plan, the numbers, the window that was closing. 11 people said no. 7 said yes on the spot. 4 asked for a week and then said yes. 3 asked for more time, and I told them the allocation was nearly full, which, after the first 11, it actually was. Final count, 200 memberships. Sold out in 17 days. Cost, lifetime VIP access for 200 people across all future venues. Return, $3 million cash. The system updated, raised, $5 million remaining. $5 million days elapsed. 21 days remaining, 39. 5 million left. 39 days. I sat in my car outside the last membership meeting and ran the options. The system was already showing me the path. One more investor at scale, or a bank. Both had prices attached. A third investor at the terms Ruji got would mean giving away another 10 to 15% of the company. The equity was starting to matter. 3 rounds of dilution and I'd be a minority shareholder in my own project before the foundation was poured. A bank meant debt. It also meant putting the land up as collateral, the only real asset I had, the last thing my father gave me. If the build stalled, if the licensing failed, if anything went wrong at the wrong moment, the bank took the land, and the whole thing ended where it started. The system displayed both options side by side. Clean numbers. No recommendation this time. I thought about it for longer than I'd thought about anything in years. Then I called the bank. The land went up as collateral. $5 million arrived in the project account 4 days later. Cost, the land, everything, pledged against the loan. If this fails, there is nothing left. Return, $5 million. Full objective met. The system updated one final time that night. Objective complete, capital raised. $10 million time used. 25 of 60 days equity issued. 12%. Ruji, permanent liabilities. 3% Hayato Lounge. Hayato, debt. $5 million at bank rate. Land as collateral, founding members. 200 objective 2 unlocked. Assemble the team. I looked at the number for a while. $10 million. 25 days ago, I had $4,000 in my pocket and a piece of land I was planning to sell. My father would have had something to say about that. I didn't know if it would be good or bad. I decided I'd find out by the time the casino opened. The system gave me 2 names. No preamble. No context. Just a name, an address, and a single line of description for each, the way you'd label tools before a job. I read them both. Then I went to find them. Toru was 53 years old and currently unemployed. He'd spent 26 years as a site foreman, shopping centers, logistics hubs, 1 regional hospital, 2 office towers. His last employer had gone bankrupt 4 months ago, mid-project, leaving 40 workers unpaid and Toru holding a clipboard full of incomplete handover documents and no one to hand them to. The system's note was 3 words. He needs work. I found him at a diner 2 blocks from his apartment. He was eating alone, reading something on his phone, and he looked up when I sat down across from him without being invited. "You're not eating here," he said. "No. I have a project. I need a site foreman. Then call a recruitment agency. I need one who can start Monday and work without a fixed salary for the first 4 months." He put his phone down. "Get out." I put the plans on the table. They were the system's blueprints, full engineering drawings, structural calculations, phased construction schedule, material specifications. The kind of documents that cost 6 figures to produce. Toru looked at them the way a doctor looks at a scan, not impressed by the paper, just reading what it says. He was quiet for almost 3 minutes. I counted. "Casino," he said finally. Not a question. "Casino, hotel, spa. Phase 1. There's more after that." "Who drew these?" "I did." He looked up at me for the first time since he'd started reading. "You didn't draw these. Does it matter?" He looked back down, turned 2 more pages, stopped at the foundation sequence. "This phasing is smart," he said quietly. like he didn't particularly want to admit it. You're pouring the hotel foundation while the casino shell goes up. Most people sequence them end to end and lose 6 weeks. 8 weeks, by my estimate. He closed the folder, pushed it back toward me, but slowly. I have 22 years of invoices. I know what work costs. You want me to run this site for 4 months on a handshake and a percentage of something that doesn't exist yet? Yes. Why would I do that? Because you've been sitting in this diner for 4 months and the work you're being offered doesn't look like this. I tap the folder. And because I'll put the deferred payment in writing. Specific number, specific trigger date, signed before you lift a shovel. Toru drank his coffee, set the cup down. What's the deferred number? I told him. The system had calculated it. Fair market rate for the full engagement, plus a 20% premium for the risk. He was quiet for a moment. Then, if you miss that date, I walk and you owe me the full amount immediately. Agreed. I want weekly budget reporting. Every Friday. If you go more than 8% over on any line item without telling me first, I walk. Agreed. And I run the site. Not you. You don't tell my workers what to do. You talk to me, and I decide. Agreed. He held out his hand. I shook it. Cost. Deferred payment, $200,000 at project milestone, plus site authority. Return. A site foreman who reads blueprints like sheet music and has built everything worth building in a 3-city radius. Ayako was harder. 35 years old. Corporate lawyer, M&A, licensing, regulatory compliance. She'd spent 8 years at one of the largest firms in the region before walking out 6 months ago after a dispute with a senior partner over a case she refused to sign off on. The system's note said, she's the best licensing attorney within 400 kilometers. She knows it. Lead with the scope, not the money. She met me at a coffee shop near the courthouse and arrived 4 minutes early. She had the look of someone who had already decided the answer was no and was here out of mild professional curiosity. Gaming license applications in this jurisdiction take between 8 and 14 months, she said, before I'd opened the folder. You need it in 6 to hit any reasonable opening window. That's the first problem. Can it be done in 6? It can be done in 6 if you file correctly the first time, if your financial documentation is airtight from day one, and if someone is managing the regulatory relationship continuously, not just at submission. Most applicants lose 3 months to resubmission. That's where the timeline dies. That's why I'm talking to you, and not someone else. She looked at me steadily. What are you offering? 5% of the company. She didn't react. 5% of what valuation? Current. The land plus raise capital. 12 months from now, considerably more. The licensing is one piece. I need full legal coverage across the build. Contracts, employment, planning, any disputes that come up. That's a significant scope. It's a significant percentage. She picked up the site overview I'd placed on the table and read it the same way Toru had. Properly, not politely. When she finished, she turned back to the first page and looked at the phasing timeline. Your casino opening window is aggressive. I know. If the license is delayed past month 7, your hotel's soft opening conflicts with your high season. You lose the first summer. Which is why the license can't be delayed past month 7. She looked at me. Something shifted in her expression, not warmth exactly, but the recognition of a problem she actually wanted to solve. 5%, she said, vesting over 18 months. If the project collapses before month 9, I keep whatever has vested and you pay my standard hourly for all work completed. Done. One more thing. She closed the folder. I work independently. I'll report to you on legal matters. I don't take direction from your construction team, your investors, or anyone else on the project. If there's a legal question, it comes to me, and my answer is final. Understood. She nodded once, the shortest possible gesture that still counted as an agreement, and picked up her coffee. Cost, 5% equity, vesting 18 months. Return, the only person within 400 kilometers who can get a gaming license filed correctly in 6 months. By the end of the week, I had a team. By the end of the following week, I had a problem. Toru called me on a Thursday morning, earlier than he'd ever called before, which told me before he said a word that something had gone wrong. Ground survey came back, he said. The soil profile in the northeast quadrant is different from what the documents show. We're going to need a different foundation approach in that section, or the materials cost jumps by $400,000. $400,000. Against a budget that was already fully allocated. I didn't say anything for a moment. Toru waited. I was learning, the kind of man who gave you the problem and then gave you space to think about it rather than filling the silence with noise. What's the alternative foundation method? I asked. He described it. The system had already pulled the specifications by the time he finished and was displaying them alongside a cost comparison. The alternative was technically sound, different load distribution, slightly longer cure time, but workable, and it was 30% cheaper than upgrading the materials. That saves us how much against the problem? I asked. Against the 400? You're looking at roughly 280 in savings. Net cost of the issue drops to about 120. Do it. You're sure? I want you to understand the cure time adds 4 days to the foundation phase. 4 days I can absorb. For 100,000 I can't. Toru paused. All right. I'll have the revised schedule to you by tonight. He hung up. The system marked the first on-site problem resolved. I sat with the number for a minute. $120,000. Absorbed, managed, closed. For months ago, I'd lost more than that in a single weekend at a card table and barely registered it. Same amount of money. Completely different weight. The second problem came from Ayako. She called on a Friday afternoon, 2 weeks into the build. The planning office is holding our commercial development sign-off, she said. The official handling our file is asking for a meeting to discuss outstanding procedural concerns. He was not specific about what those were. How long can he hold it? Legally, indefinitely. Practically, he won't want the paper trail of a prolonged delay without cause. He's looking for something. I understood what she meant. Can we go around him? Not without creating a worse problem further up the chain. Going around a mid-level official in a regional planning office tends to produce enemies in regional planning offices. Then what do you suggest? She was quiet for a moment. There's a family in the district, the Matsuda family. They have a long-running boundary dispute with a neighboring property. It's a legitimate case, straightforward, but they can't afford representation. If that case got resolved, quietly, at no cost to them, it would register as a favor in the right social network. And the official handling our file is in that network. He grew up with the eldest Matsuda's son. I thought about it. Can you handle the Matsuda case? In a week. It's not complicated. Do it. Cost. 1 week of Ayako's time on a pro bono case. Return. Commercial development sign-off. File cleared in 3 days after the Matsuda case resolved. By the end of month 2, the foundation was poured. I stood at the edge of the site on a Tuesday evening when the crews had left and looked at what we had. Concrete and rebar and survey markers and nothing else. Nothing that looked like anything yet. Just the beginning of the shape of something. Toru appeared beside me. He did that sometimes, showed up without announcing himself, looked at the work, left again. On schedule? I asked. 3 days ahead, he said. The revised foundation method actually cured faster than the standard in this temperature. We made back the 4 days. I nodded. He was quiet for a moment. Then, your father built things too. Smaller scale, but he built things. I didn't answer. I worked with him once, Toru said. Long time ago. Small warehouse project. He was the kind of man who came to the site himself. Not to check on people, just to see it going up. He said nothing else. Walked back to his truck and drove away. I stayed at the edge of the foundation until it got dark. The casino shell went up in 11 weeks. I watched it happen in increments, steel frame, then concrete floors, then the skin of the building closing around it like something coming to life from the inside out. Every Friday, Toru handed me a budget report, 1 page, no decoration. Every Friday, the numbers were within tolerance. Not always comfortable, but within tolerance. The hotel was rising on the adjacent footprint at the same time, Shinji's project, his money, his contractors, but under the same site authority as everything else. Toru had made that a condition before he'd agree to coordinate across 2 simultaneous builds. Shinji had agreed without argument. He was the kind of investor who cared about returns, not credit. Shinji was 51, owned 4 business hotels in 2 cities, and had come to me through Ruji's network 3 weeks into the capital raise. He didn't want equity in the main company. He wanted the right to build and operate the hotel as a separate entity within the complex, his brand, his staff, his P&L, with a revenue-sharing agreement tied to the shared customer base. The system had flagged him before I'd even finished describing the hotel component to Ruji. He's been looking for a 5th property for 2 years. He wants a destination, not another business hotel on a ring road. Show him the full complex plan. I showed him the full plan. He signed within a week. The spa was my addition, or rather, the systems, delivered as a note during the hotel design phase. Female guests spend 40% more per visit when a spa is present. They also return at twice the rate. Build it into the hotel footprint, shared entrance, separate booking. Toru looked at the revised plans and said nothing for a long moment. This adds 6 weeks, he said finally. I know. You're adding 6 weeks to hit an opening date that's already tight. The spa shares the hotel structure. We're not adding a new building. We're finishing what's already framed. He looked at the drawings again. 4 weeks. I can do it in 4 if I add a second interior crew and run split shifts on the finishing work. What does that cost? He told me. I approved it before he finished the sentence. Cost, additional crew, split shifts, $180,000 over budget on interior fit-out. Return, a spa in the building rather than planned for phase 2. The licensing decision came on a Tuesday morning, month 7. Ayako called at 8:15. Her voice was exactly the same as it always was, measured, no wasted words, and for a moment I couldn't read it. We have the license, she said. I sat down. I hadn't realized I was standing. Full approval? Full approval. Operational conditions are standard, nothing we didn't anticipate. I'll have the documentation to you by end of day. I stayed on the phone for another few seconds without saying anything useful. Kenji. A pause. We're on schedule. Yes, I said. We are. I called Toru next. He said good, and hung up. That was Toru's version of a celebration. I called Ruji. He said he'd open a good bottle that evening and asked if I wanted to join him. I said maybe, knowing I wouldn't. There was too much still to do, and I didn't trust myself around open bottles at this particular stage of anything. The Bariki problem started quietly, the way most serious problems do. His full name was Hiroshi Bariki. 55 years old, second-generation operator. His father had built the first entertainment venues in the region 30 years ago. And Hiroshi had spent the following 2 decades expanding the portfolio until it covered 9 properties across 4 cities. He wasn't the largest operator in the country, but in this region, he was the closest thing to one. The system had flagged him early, a single line, almost a footnote. Bariki has had this land identified as a potential acquisition target for 3 years. He will notice construction. He noticed in month 4. I knew because Ayako told me she'd seen his company's legal representative pulling the public planning files on our site. Informational only, she said. But they're watching. The first move came in month 8, 3 weeks before our target opening. Ayako called on a Wednesday. We have a problem. The problem was an injunction application, filed by a company I didn't recognize, citing a boundary discrepancy in the original land survey. The claim was that 0.3 hectares of our site overlapped with an adjacent parcel that had changed hands 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, while we were in final fit-out. Who owns the adjacent parcel? I asked. A pause. A holding company registered 4 months ago. The directorship is obscured through 2 layers, but the registered address is the same building as Bariki's primary legal firm. I was quiet for a moment. If the injunction is granted, construction stops. All of it, casino, hotel, spa. The court process takes a minimum of 6 weeks, more likely 12. You missed the opening window. Your founding members have a contractual right to request refunds after a 90-day delay. Ruji's exit clause becomes relevant. The bank reviews the collateral position. Everything, in other words. All of it, simultaneously. What do we have to fight it? The original survey is clean. The discrepancy he's citing is 0.3 hectares on a boundary that was formally established in the land registry 11 years ago. It's not a strong claim. She paused. But it doesn't need to be strong. It needs to be pending. A weak claim that takes 12 weeks to resolve does the same damage as a strong one. I thought about it. What does he actually want? That's the right question, she said. He doesn't want 0.3 hectares. He wants a conversation. Then let's have one. I called Bariki directly. His assistant put me through in under a minute, which told me he'd been expecting the call. Yamamoto's son, he said. Not unfriendly. Assessing. Kenji, I said. I think you know why I'm calling. I know exactly why you're calling. A pause. You've built something faster than I expected. I've been watching the site since month 4. The phasing is good. The location is better than I gave it credit for when your father bought it. He knew what he was doing. He did. Another pause. Genuine this time, not tactical. What do you want from this conversation? The injunction withdrawn. Permanently. And confirmation that you won't file any further procedural challenges against the project. And what do I get? What do you want? Silence on the line. I let it run. The system had told me nothing for this call. No script, no suggested offer, no data point to drop. For the first time since the night the hologram appeared in my apartment, I was entirely on my own. 10%, Bariki said, of the whole company. And a seat at the table when you plan phase 2. No. No to which part? Both. I kept my voice level. I'm not selling equity to resolve a procedural complaint. And I'm not giving you a planning role in something you tried to stop 3 weeks before opening. A long silence. Then what are you offering? I've been thinking about this since Ayako's call. Not the system's answer, mine. When I build phase 2, I'll need contacts. Regional officials, site acquisition support, vendor networks. You have all of that. I'm offering a formal advisory arrangement, paid, structured, specific scope, on phase 2 planning only. No equity, no operational role in what's already built. And the injunction goes away today. Bariki was quiet for almost 15 seconds. You're offering me a consulting fee. I'm offering you a seat at the table for what comes next, which is larger than what you're looking at now. The injunction buys you nothing except the satisfaction of delaying me. The advisory role buys you access to the next phase before anyone else knows it exists. Another silence. Shorter this time. Send the terms to my office. If they're reasonable, the injunction is withdrawn by end of week. He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment. Then I called Ayako. Draft an advisory agreement, I said. Phase 2 planning consultation. Paid engagement, defined scope, no equity, no operational authority. Bariki's name on it. A pause. That was fast. Send it today. Cost. A paid advisory role for Bariki on phase 2. His network, his access, his relationships, now pointed in my direction instead of against it. Return. Injunction withdrawn. Opening date intact. And Bariki, who spent 3 weeks trying to stop this, now has a financial reason to want it to succeed. The system updated quietly. Threat neutralized. Opening window confirmed. We opened on a Friday evening in the first week of October. 800 people. Invitations only. Founding members, investors, regional press. A list that Ruji had helped curate and Ayako had vetted for anyone who might create a compliance issue. The casino floor was at half capacity by 9. Full capacity by 10:30. I stood at the edge of the floor for a while and watched it. The sound of it was different from what I'd expected. I'd spent years in casinos, as a customer, as a problem, as someone who left with less than he arrived with every single time. I knew what a casino sounded like from the inside of a losing streak, which is a specific and unpleasant frequency. This was different. This was the same sound from the other side of the table. Ruji found me around 11. He had a drink in his hand and the expression of a man who had bet on something uncertain and watched it come in. Your Thursday and Friday early evening numbers, he said. Remember I told you they were down? I remember. I checked last week's against the same period last year. He paused. They're up 4%. The complex is pulling your customers back out. It's pulling them here first and sending them on to me after. He looked at the floor. That's better, actually. Shinji appeared briefly, shook my hand, said the hotel was at 91% occupancy for the opening weekend, and left to talk to someone else. That was Shinji. Efficient with everything, including gratitude. Toru was not there. He had told me 2 days before the opening that he didn't attend parties. I told him it wasn't a party, it was an opening. He said that sounded like a party. I didn't argue. The first month's numbers came in on a Tuesday morning, delivered by the system in the same clean format it used for everything. I read them twice. Casino, monthly gross, $28,400,000. Hotel, occupancy, 91%. RevPAR, significantly above regional average. Spa, fully booked 14 days in advance. Combined complex, net operating income, month 1, $6,200,000. The bank loan repayment schedule, covered, with margin. Toru's deferred payment, paid, in full, on the date we'd agreed. I transferred Toru's money on a Monday morning and called him when it had cleared. He picked up on the second ring. It's in your account, I said. A pause. I know. I checked. Thank you for the work. Another pause. Longer. It's a good building, he said. The foundation especially. And then, because he was Toru, don't mess up the next phase. He hung up. I looked at the month 1 numbers for a while longer. Then the system lit up with a new notification, the first since opening night. Objective 2 complete. Casino, operational. Hotel, operational. Spa, operational. Net month 1 income, $6,200,000. Objective 3 unlocked. Horse racing facility. Minimum 4 hectares required. Current available land, 0. Acquire adjacent land to proceed. I looked at the site map. The complex filled every meter of available space. All 15 hectares, original 10 plus the parcels acquired during build, developed, occupied, running. For hectares, adjacent to the highway, adjacent to the complex, already in the system's plan. Currently owned by a 71-year-old farmer named Kikuchi who had lived on that land for 40 years and, according to the system's single line of background, had declined 2 previous acquisition approaches from other developers. I looked at the map for a long time. Then I want to find out what Kikuchi actually cared about. The system had almost nothing on Kikuchi. That was unusual. Every other name it had given me came with data, revenue figures, debt profiles, professional history, the specific pressure point that would make a conversation productive. Kikuchi got 3 lines, 71 years old, 40 years on the land, 2 previous acquisition approaches declined. No leverage, no angle, no script. I drove out to see him on a Wednesday morning, unannounced, because the system had no appointment to suggest. The farm was 4 hectares of flat, well-kept land running alongside the highway, exactly where the system's map showed the racing facility needed to go. The soil looked good. The fencing was old but maintained. There was a small house at the northern edge, a storage barn behind it, and a vegetable plot beside the barn that was better tended than anything else on the property. Kikuchi was in the vegetable plot when I arrived. 71 years old, moving slowly but not carefully. The difference between a man who has learned his own pace and a man who has lost his. He looked up when I came through the gate and didn't look surprised to see me. Developer, he said. Not a question. Kenji. I built the complex next door. He looked at me for a moment. Then he went back to what he was doing. I stood at the edge of the plot and watched him work for a minute. Eventually, he said, without looking up, the other 2 sent lawyers. Then they sent younger lawyers. Then one of them sent someone with a folder full of photographs showing what the land could become. He straightened up. What did you bring? Nothing, I said. I came to ask what you'd actually want if you were going to sell, which I understand you're not. He looked at me properly for the first time. Something in his expression shifted, not softening exactly, but recalibrating. Come inside, he said. The house was small and clean and full of things that had been in the same position for a long time. A kitchen table that had hosted 40 years of meals. Photographs on a shelf, a younger Kikuchi, a woman who must have been his wife, children who were now probably older than me. He made tea without asking if I wanted any and set it on the table between us. My wife died 8 years ago, he said. The children are in the city. They visit at New Year and occasionally in summer. He wrapped both hands around his cup. They want me to sell and move closer to them. The developers want me to sell and move anywhere. Everyone wants the same thing from me. The reasons are different, but the ask is identical. What do you want? He looked at me over his cup. That's a strange question from a developer. You've already said no twice. The standard approach isn't working. So I'm asking a different question. He was quiet for a while. Outside the kitchen window, the morning light was sitting flat across the vegetable plot. He looked at it the way people look at things they've looked at every day for decades, not seeing it exactly, just registering that it's still there. I want to stay involved in something, he said finally. I'm 71. I'm not ready to sit in an apartment near my children and wait to get older. I've worked this land my whole life. I understand how to tend things, how to read weather, how to keep animals healthy. If I sell and go, he stopped. I stopped being useful. That's what I don't want. I sat with that for a moment. The system was quiet. Whatever I said next was mine. The racing facility will need a stable operation, I said. 30 horses minimum, probably more as the facility grows. That means a stable manager, someone who understands animals, understands land, understands how to run an operation day to day. It's not a ceremonial role. It's real work, 6 days a week. He looked at me. I'd want the stable named after your family, I continued. Permanently, on the building, on the program, on every race day, printed material. Kikuchi Stables. And I'd want you in the role for as long as you want it, at a proper salary, with housing on-site if you want to stay near the land. Silence. You'd be selling the land, I said, but you'd still be working it, just in a different form. Kikuchi set down his cup, looked at the window again, looked back at me. What do I get for the land itself? I named the number, full market rate, assessed independently, no discount for a motivated sale. The system had given me that much, what the land was actually worth. He nodded slowly. Not agreement yet, just acknowledgement that the number was real. I'd want the stable management contract in writing before I signed anything on the land, he said. Separate document. Independent legal review. Of course. And I want a clause that says if the facility closes, the stable name stays on the building for whatever replaces it. Whatever it becomes, Kikuchi is on it. I thought about that for a moment. It cost me nothing. It meant something to him that I didn't fully understand, but recognized as real. Done, I said. He looked at me for a long time. Then he picked up his cup again and drank the rest of his tea. Come back on Friday with the paperwork, he said. I'll have my lawyer look at it over the weekend. I drove back to the complex and called Ayako before I was out of his driveway. Cost, market rate land purchase, stable management salary, named building right in perpetuity. Return, for hectares. And a stable manager who has spent 40 years learning how to keep living things alive. The racing facility took 5 months to build. Toru ran it the same way he ran everything. Weekly reports, no surprises, a budget that moved within tolerances he'd set himself and defended like personal property. Kikuchi was on site from the second month, walking the stable footprint before the framing was even up, asking questions about drainage and ventilation that Toru couldn't answer without checking the drawings. They didn't like each other at first. Toru thought Kikuchi was in the way. Kikuchi thought Toru was building a machine instead of a place where animals would live. By month 3, they had reached the specific kind of mutual respect that develops between two people who are both right about different things. The partner for the racing operation was Haruki, 44 years old, third-generation horse breeder, a man whose family had been in this industry longer than the regional regulatory framework that governed it. He came recommended by the system but arrived already knowing about the facility through the regional breeding community, which had apparently been discussing it since planning approval went public. You're building a compact track, he said at our first meeting, looking at the layout. 8,000 meters. The land is 4 hectares. That's what fits. City format, he said, not disparagingly, just categorizing. Corporate entertainment crowd, not serious racing people. The corporate entertainment crowd bets more per race than serious racing people, and they book tables in advance. He looked at me, then at the drawings. The stable capacity is good. 30 horses is enough to run a credible card if the breeding quality is there. He paused. I can supply 12 horses for the first season. Well-bred, mid-tier competition horses. They'll look good and run honestly. What do you want for that? Naming rights on the breeding partnership. And first right of refusal if you ever expand the stable capacity. Done on both. Haruki turned out to be exactly what the facility needed. Someone who understood horses well enough to make the racing credible, and who understood business well enough not to get precious about what the facility was actually for. The 12 VIP boxes were Ruji's idea. He'd come to me 3 months into construction with a single page of numbers and the look of a man who had done the arithmetic carefully before deciding it was worth mentioning. Corporate boxes, he said. Annual lease. You sell the year up front, not the individual race days, the whole season. The box holder gets 12 race days, plus private access for events between race days. You put the page on the table. At this lease rate, 12 boxes covers 30% of the facility's annual operating cost before you've sold a single general admission ticket. I looked at the number. You've thought about this. I've been in the events business for 15 years. The people who spend serious money don't want to buy individual tickets. They want a place that's already theirs. He paused. Same psychology as your founding memberships. You already understand it. The boxes went to pre-sale before the track surface was laid. All 12 sold in 3 weeks. 6 to corporate clients Ruji brought directly. 4 to founding members who had been waiting for the next thing to invest in. 2 to contacts Bariki's advisory network quietly surfaced without being asked. That last part was interesting. Bariki hadn't said anything about it. The 2 clients had simply appeared through channels that traced back to his network. He was, apparently, making himself useful in his own way and on his own schedule. I noted it. Did not comment on it. The online betting platform went live the same week the track opened. That had been the system's most insistent addition to the plan. Not the track, not the boxes, not the horses. The platform. The track generates revenue from attendance, the system had said, during planning. The platform generates revenue from everyone who can attend. Your catchment area for online betting is not 4 hectares. It is everywhere. I'd asked Ayako to map the licensing requirements for online wagering 6 months before opening. It was complicated, multiple regulatory jurisdictions, technical compliance requirements, a separate license application running parallel to everything else. She'd handled it without drama, which was her way of handling everything. The platform launched with the first race day. 43,000 registered users by end of week 1, most of them having found the platform through the live stream of the opening card, which the system had insisted on broadcasting for free. You're giving away the broadcast? Toru had asked, when I told him. The broadcast is an advertisement for the betting platform, I said. Every viewer is a potential account. He'd looked at me with the expression he used when he thought I was probably right, but didn't want to say so. By end of month 1, online betting revenue was running at 41% of the facility's total income. By month 2, it was 47. The first race day drew 9,000 people. Kikuchi was at the stable entrance at 6 in the morning when the horses arrived, which was 3 hours before anyone else. I saw him on the camera feed from the side office, moving between the stalls, checking each animal, talking to the handlers in the specific way that people talk to animals they understand. I watched that for a minute before the day started. Then I went to meet the first guests. Bariki came in the afternoon, not as a guest, exactly. He walked the facility with the specific attention of someone assessing a competitor, which was fair, because that was what he was. We shook hands at the entrance and walked the track perimeter together. The box take was strong, he said. I heard the pre-sale went in 3 weeks. It did. The online platform is smarter than I expected. He paused. I expected a track. You built a betting operation with a track attached. The system suggested it. He glanced at me. What system? My planning process, I said. He accepted that without further question. We walked in silence for a moment. The advisory arrangement has been useful, he said finally. From my side, I noticed. The 2-box clients. He nodded once. Not quite an acknowledgement, just confirmation that I'd seen it correctly. Phase 2, he said. When does planning start? When month 2 revenue confirms the model. He nodded again. When you're ready, I have 3 land introductions that will save you 6 months of acquisition work. He stopped walking and looked at the track. You're going to need a lot more land. I know. He said nothing else. We watched 2 horses run a practice circuit in the evening light. Haruki's animals, moving well, the sound of hooves on the new surface carrying further than I'd expected in the open air. Month 2 numbers, racing facility, track attendance revenue, $1,400,000. VIP box leases, annualized monthly $890,000. Online betting platform, $2,100,000. Total facility monthly, for $1,390,000. Combined complex monthly, casino, hotel, spa, racing, gross revenue, $36,200,000. Net operating income, $9,800,000. The system updated at midnight on the last day of month 2. Objective 3 complete. Racing facility, operational. Online platform, active. Combined NOI, $9,800,000 per month. Objective 4 unlocked. Concert arena, 8,000 capacity. Land required, 3 hectares. Identify and acquire. Advisory note. Remaining developable land on current site, 1.2 hectares. Land acquisition required before arena construction can begin. I looked at the site map for a long time. The system was right, as it generally was about things that could be measured. The complex was almost full. The casino, hotel, spa, track, stabling, parking, service infrastructure. It all fit, and it fit well, but there was no room left for something the size of an 8,000-seat arena. Which meant the next phase wasn't just a new building. It was new land. More of it. In the right place, at the right price, before anyone else understood what it was going to be worth. I looked at the map until the numbers stopped being abstract and became geography, roads, boundaries, neighboring parcels, the specific shapes of what was available and what stood between me and where this was going. Then I called Bariki. You said you had 3 land introductions, I said when he picked up. I did. I need them. A pause. Then, and I heard something in his voice that hadn't been there before, something that might have been satisfaction. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring your site plans. Bariki's office was on the 14th floor of a building that had been the tallest in the city for about 15 years before something newer came along. The view from his window covered the highway corridor heading south, and if you knew what you were looking at, you could see the edge of the complex from there. The casino tower, the hotel, the track lights, still up from the previous evening. He was already at his desk when I arrived. Plans open, which meant he'd been thinking about this before I called. 3 parcels, he said, without preamble. Different owners, different situations, all adjacent to your southern boundary. He turned the map toward me. This one, he pointed to the largest, is a logistics company that bought the land 7 years ago for a distribution hub that was never built. They've been carrying the asset cost ever since. They want out. Motivated seller, realistic expectations. I looked at the parcel. 5 hectares. Exactly where I needed it. The second is a family holding. 2 brothers who inherited it from their father and haven't agreed on anything since. One wants to sell, one wants to develop. They've been in that argument for 4 years. The right offer, framed the right way, ends the argument. And the third. Bariki sat back. The third is complicated. I waited. It's 2 hectares, directly between your eastern fence and the logistics parcel. Without it, you have 2 separate land pieces that don't connect. With it, everything runs together. He paused. It's held by a woman named Mickey Ando, 63 years old. She bought it 12 years ago as an investment and has been waiting for the right moment to sell. The complication is that she's had 2 offers in the past 18 months, both above market, and declined both. Why? I don't know, Bariki said. And I tried to find out. That was unusual enough to register. Bariki struck me as a man who generally found out what he wanted to find out. How much total land across all 3? I asked. 11 hectares if you get all of them. I looked at the map. 19 current hectares plus 11 new ones, 30 hectares. Enough for the arena, the restaurants, the second hotel. Enough to begin building something that looked less like a complex and more like a destination. I'll take the logistics company first, I said. Clean transaction, motivated seller. That one closes fastest. Then the brothers. Ando last, once I understand what she actually wants. Bariki nodded. I'll make the introductions today. The logistics company CFO is expecting your call. I stood to leave. Then, why are you helping with this? The advisory arrangement covers consultation. This is more than consultation. He looked at me for a moment. I have 5% of Zone 2, he said. Zone 2 doesn't exist until you have the land for it. He said it simply, without embarrassment, just the clean logic of a man who understood where his interests sat. Also, he paused. You're building something I would have built if I'd moved faster 3 years ago. There's a version of this where I'm sitting across the table from you as competition. This version is more interesting. I left without answering that. There was nothing useful to say. The logistics company took 11 days to close. Their CFO was a precise, tired man named Oda who had been explaining to his board for 3 years why the land hadn't generated a return. The conversation lasted 40 minutes and spent maybe 5 of them on actual negotiation. He wanted out. I wanted in. The price was slightly above his carrying cost, which was below market, which meant I got 5 hectares at a number that would have been impossible without Bariki's introduction framing the context before I arrived. Cost, below market acquisition, structured settlement over 90 days. Land acquired, 5 hectares. The brothers, Daisuke and Fumio Nakano, took longer, and not because of the money. They met me together, which immediately made the dynamic complicated in the way that two people who disagree about everything are complicated when they're in the same room. Daisuke, the one who wanted to sell, was 61 and visibly relieved to have a concrete offer on the table. Fumio, who wanted to develop, was 58 and visibly unhappy about everything, including the chair he was sitting in. I let them talk to each other for about 10 minutes before I said anything. The system had no specific guidance. I watched the shape of the argument and waited for the thing that was actually underneath it. It wasn't about the land. Fumio didn't want to develop the land. He wanted to have been the one who developed it. Or more precisely, he didn't want his brother to get credit for a decision that turned out well. 40 years of a specific family dynamic concentrated into 4 hectares of disputed inheritance. I have a role, I said, when there was a pause long enough to enter. Not a token role, a genuine one. The arena we're building on the adjacent parcel will need a general manager for event operations, someone who can run the facility day to day, manage the booking calendar, handle vendor relationships. It's a real job. Salary, title, operational authority within defined scope. I looked at Fumio. I'm offering it to you. He looked at me, then at his brother, then back at me. Why me? Because you understand what it means to build something and you'd rather be inside that process than outside it watching someone else do it. I paused. I could be wrong about that. He was quiet for a long moment. Daisuke said nothing, which was smart of him. What's the operational scope? Fumio asked. We talked for another hour. By the end of it, he had a job offer in writing and his brother had a signed heads of agreement on the land sale. Cost, for hectares at market rate, general manager salary for Fumio. Return, for hectares, and an arena operations manager who has a personal stake in making the facility succeed. That left Miki Ando. She agreed to meet me at a restaurant near her apartment, her choice of venue, which told me something. People who agree to meet at your office are on your ground. People who pick a neutral place are negotiating from the start. She was 63, precisely dressed, and had the particular composure of someone who has been comfortable with silence for a long time. She ordered tea, waited for me to sit, and then said, "You've bought the logistics parcel and the Nakano land. Without my 2 hectares, your acquisitions don't connect." That's correct. So you need mine more than you needed theirs. Also correct. She looked at me steadily. Then why are you smiling? Because you already know all of this and you're telling me anyway, I said. Which means you're not trying to hide your position. Which means you're not playing for the highest possible price. You want something specific, and you want to see if I'm the kind of person who will give it to you. A pause. Something shifted in her expression, not surprise, more like recalibration. 2 people offered me above market in the past 18 months, she said. I declined both. I know. Why? Because they were buying land. I'm not interested in selling land. She wrapped both hands around her tea. That parcel has appreciated 300% since I bought it. Selling it now, even above market, is the worst financial decision I could make. The only reason to sell is if what I get back is worth more than what I'd make by waiting another 10 years. What would be worth more than 10 years of appreciation? She looked at me. A position in the thing being built on it. I thought about it. What kind of position? Equity. In the new zone, not the existing complex. Clean entry, defined percentage, no operational obligations unless I choose to take them. What percentage? 3, she said. Of Zone 2, valued at land contribution plus a reasonable premium for the strategic value of the connector parcel. I ran the numbers quietly. 3% of Zone 2 was meaningful, more than Hayato's lounge percentage, less than Ruji's position. But Ando was right about the strategic value. Without that 2-hectare connector, I had 2 separate land acquisitions that didn't function as a single site. 2%, I said, plus a seat on the Zone 2 advisory board, non-executive, quarterly meetings, full financial reporting. She considered it for exactly long enough that I knew she'd already decided. Done, she said. Cost, 2% of Zone 2 equity, advisory board seat. Return, 2 hectares and a connected site, 30 hectares total, functioning as one. The arena broke ground 6 weeks after the Ando agreement closed. Toru looked at the new site boundary on the first morning and was quiet for a long time in the way he was quiet when he was doing calculations in his head. 30 hectares, he said. For now. He looked at me sideways. For now. Build the arena first. We'll talk about what comes next when it's framed. He made a sound that was not quite agreement, but wasn't disagreement either, and went to brief his crew. Saito arrived 3 days after groundbreaking, which was precisely when I'd asked him to come and precisely the kind of punctuality I was learning to expect from him. He was 38 years old, had been promoting concerts and events since he was 22, and moved through the world at a pace that made everyone around him feel slightly behind. He talked fast, thought faster, and had the specific gift of knowing, with what seemed like genuine instinct, which artists would fill a room and which ones would leave 300 empty seats at the back. He walked the construction site in a hard hat and good shoes, which was exactly the combination you'd expect from someone who understood both the creative and commercial sides of the business. 8,000 seats, he said, looking at the footprint. In-stage configuration, in-stage primary, with a floor section that converts for standing events. You can run it seated at 8,000 or standing at 11. He stopped walking. Standing at 11 is a different conversation. That's a national touring size. I know. He looked at the site for a moment. If you can genuinely deliver 11,000 standing, I can put names in here that don't currently have a venue in this region. He turned to face me. There are 4 artists in the current touring cycle who are skipping this whole area because there's nowhere appropriately sized to play. There will be in 7 months. He looked at me the way people look at things they're deciding whether to believe. What do you want from me? He asked. I want you to run the booking calendar, manage the production relationships, and build the event program for the first 2 years. Exclusively, you don't take outside bookings that conflict with arena availability. That's a significant commitment. It's a significant opportunity. I paused. You've been the promoter for 15 years. You've made other people's venues successful. This one can have your name attached to how it runs, not just what shows you bring in. He thought about that. What's the structure? We negotiated for 40 minutes. He came in on a performance-based arrangement, a base retainer against a percentage of event gross above a defined threshold. If the arena underperformed, he made less. If it ran at the level he was projecting, he made considerably more than any fixed salary I could have offered. He signed the term sheet in the site office, still in his hard hat, using Toru's pen. 7 months, he said. 7 months, I confirmed. He left immediately to make phone calls. I watched him go and thought that 7 months was going to be a very busy 7 months. The arena opened on a Saturday night in late spring. The first act was a regional artist, Sato's deliberate choice, not the biggest name he could book, but one with a local following deep enough to fill the room without the risk that comes with a national headline act on an untested venue. 8,000 people. Full house. I stood at the back of the floor during the second half of the set and listened to the sound of 8,000 people in a room that had been a construction site 7 months ago. The acoustics were correct. Toru had overseen 3 rounds of acoustic testing that he described to me in more technical detail than I could entirely follow, but the result was audible. The room sounded like a room that was built to sound like this. Fumio Nakano was in the production office that night, managing the operational flow with the specific intensity of a man who has been given something real to do and intends to do it correctly. I checked in with him twice during the setup day. Both times he'd waved me off, not rudely, just with the particular focus of someone in the middle of actual work. Saito was everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. On the floor, then backstage, then at the production desk, then talking to someone near the bar. He had the movement pattern of someone who had been doing this for 15 years and had learned exactly where to be at every moment of an event. After the show, he found me near the exit and handed me a folded piece of paper. Revenue summary for the night, ticket sales, bar, merchandise split. I unfolded it and looked at the number. That's one night, he said. The second booking is in 3 weeks. Larger name. I've had 4 more inquiries since we announced the opening capacity. The 11,000 standing. The 11,000 standing, he confirmed. That number travels in this industry. Month 1 arena numbers, 3 events. 1 sold out, 2 at 93% capacity. Total event revenue, $3,100,000. Bar and hospitality, $890,000. Combined arena monthly, $3,990,000. Combined complex monthly, all facilities, gross revenue, $42,800,000. Net operating income, $13,200,000. I looked at those numbers for a long time. $13.2 million. Net. Monthly. 15 months ago, I had $4,000 in my pocket and a piece of land I was planning to sell to clear gambling debts. The system updated quietly. Objective 4 complete. Arena. Operational. 8,000 seated / 11,000 standing. Land. 30 hectares. Combined NOI. $13,200,000 per month. Objective 5 unlocked. Expand food and beverage. Minimum 6 restaurant and bar concepts across the complex. Current count, 3. Secondary note, current land utilization at 30 hectares, 71%. Remaining developable area insufficient for planned Phase 2 structures. Recommend initiating major land acquisition before further construction. Recommend minimum 100 hectares in surrounding area. I read that last line twice. 100 hectares. The current complex was 30. The system was telling me to acquire more than 3 times what I already had. Not for one building, not for one facility, but for what came after all of that. I pulled up the regional land registry on my laptop and looked at the map for a long time. The complex sat in the middle of the screen. Around it, in every direction, were parcels of various sizes with various owners in various situations. 100 hectares. I thought about Kikuchi's vegetable plot and the 40-year-old fence and the way he'd said, everyone wants the same thing from me, and how the answer had been to want something different. I thought about Fumio Nakano wanting to have built something, not just sold something. I thought about Miki Ando knowing exactly what her land was worth and waiting for someone who understood that too. 100 hectares meant more of those conversations. More Kikuchis and Nakanos and Andos. People with land and reasons and histories I'd need to understand before I could offer them anything worth taking. I called Bariki at 11 at night. He picked up on the second ring, which told me he didn't go to sleep early. Zone 2, I said. I need to start planning it seriously. 100 hectares surrounding the current site. A pause. I assumed this call was coming. Another pause. I have someone you should meet. A land acquisition specialist. She's worked regional consolidation for 20 years. Discreet, effective, and she understands that you don't show your full hand on day one. Set up the meeting. Tomorrow morning? Tomorrow morning. I hung up and looked at the site map one more time. 30 hectares had felt like an enormous amount of land when I was standing at Kikuchi's fence trying to figure out how to ask for 4 hectares without sounding like every other developer who'd knocked on his door. Now it looked small. The land acquisition specialist's name was Yuna Ishida, 44 years old. She had spent 20 years doing exactly one thing, buying land that other people didn't know was for sale yet, on behalf of clients who didn't want anyone to know they were buying. She came recommended by Bariki with a single sentence: she's never lost a consolidation, which I understood to mean she had never started an acquisition process and failed to close it. She arrived at my office with a regional land map already marked up. Not the standard registry map, a working map, covered in annotations in 3 colors, with small numbered flags on individual parcels. She had done this before our meeting. 31 parcels, she said, laying it flat on the table. Vithya. To reach 100 hectares in a contiguous block around your current site, you need some combination of these. Some are straightforward. Some are complicated. 3 are what I'd call structurally difficult. I looked at the map. The complex sat in the center. Around it, the parcels spread outward like an irregular mosaic. Different sizes, different shapes, different distances from the boundary. How long? I asked. To close all of them? At a pace that doesn't signal what you're doing, 14 months. If you move faster, word gets out that someone is consolidating, and the remaining sellers reprice against your interest. What if we move on the straightforward ones first and build toward the difficult ones? She looked at me with the expression of someone who has had this conversation before. That's the only way to do it. The difficult ones get easier once the surrounding land has transacted. Holdouts lose leverage when they're the last parcel standing. And the 3 structurally difficult ones. She tapped 3 flags on the map, one to the north, one to the east, one directly south of the current boundary. These 3 I'll need time on. The northern parcel is held in a family trust with 6 beneficiaries across 3 cities. Getting 6 people to agree on anything takes as long as it takes. The eastern parcel has an environmental flag from a drainage survey 8 years ago, probably manageable, but it needs a specialist assessment before we can move. The southern one, she paused. The southern one is Bariki's. I looked up. He owns 8 hectares directly south of your current fence line, she said. It's the largest single parcel adjacent to your site, and the most strategically valuable. Without it, your southern expansion has to route around a significant gap. He didn't mention it. No, she said. He wouldn't. I thought about that for a moment. Bariki, who had surfaced land introductions and box clients, and a specialist who immediately identified his own parcel as the key piece of the puzzle. Either he was maneuvering carefully toward a specific ask, or he was waiting to see if I'd find it myself. Leave his parcel for last, I said. Run the rest of the process. When we're at the point where his 8 hectares is the final piece, I'll have that conversation. Yuna nodded. She folded the map with the precision of someone who keeps organized records and said, I'll need a clean acquisition entity, separate legal structure, no visible connection to the complex. Buyers with obvious development interest pay a premium. Buyers who look like passive investors pay market. Talk to Ayako. She'll set it up. She left. I looked at the marked up map for a long time after she was gone. 100 hectares. 14 months. 31 conversations. The restaurants came while the land acquisition ran in the background. The system had flagged the food and beverage gap clearly. 3 concepts for a complex doing $42 million a month in gross revenue was underdeveloped. Guests were leaving the site to eat. Every meal taken off-site was a customer who had stopped spending. I added 3 new concepts over 4 months, sequenced to open as each space became available in the existing footprint. The first was the street food hall, Yoshi's idea, technically, though he'd framed it as a question rather than a suggestion. Yoshida was the Michelin chef I'd brought in for the fine dining restaurant, and he'd been watching the guest flow since opening with the particular attention of someone who understands where money moves. The guests leaving the casino at midnight, he said one evening, when he'd asked to speak to me after service. They want food, not a full restaurant experience, something immediate, informal, good quality. They'll spend $200 at the table at 11, and then walk off-site to find a ramen stand. What are you proposing? A food hall, 8 to 10 vendors, small operators, rotating concepts, open until 4 in the morning. I can curate the vendors and maintain the quality standard. You provide the space and the infrastructure. They run their own operations. Revenue structure? Percentage of gross per vendor, plus a fixed infrastructure fee. You carry no food cost and no staffing cost beyond the home management. It was, structurally, exactly right. The system confirmed it before I'd finished the conversation. Low capital requirement, no operational exposure, high margin revenue from space that was currently underutilized. The street food hall opened 6 weeks later. 10 vendors, open until 4. By the end of the first month, it was the most visited food venue on the site. The second edition was a rooftop bar on the hotel tower, Shinji's contribution, which he proposed and funded from his hotel operating budget as a guest amenity that happened to generate standalone revenue. 360-degree views, open air in summer, enclosed in winter. Reservation only after 9 in the evening. The third was a whiskey and private dining room, 40 seats, invitation only, managed by Yoshida directly. The system had suggested it with a note that read, high net worth guests consolidate their spending at a venue when they have access to something other guests don't. The exclusivity is the product. 40 seats, 2 seatings per evening. Waiting list from the first week. 6 new concepts in 4 months. Street food hall, $1,200,000 monthly, 90% margin, no food cost. Rooftop bar, $780,000 monthly. Private dining room, $620,000 monthly. 3 existing restaurants. Revenue up 18% from increased site traffic. Combined food and beverage monthly, from $1,800,000. Previous F&B monthly, $1,100,000. Increase, $3,700,000. The system closed the objective quietly. Objective 5 complete. Food and beverage, 6 concepts operational. F&B monthly contribution, from $1,800,000. Combined complex monthly, gross revenue, $48,100,000. Net operating income, $16,400,000. The land acquisition ran on a separate track through all of it. Yuna sent weekly reports, 1 page, same format as Toru's budget summaries, which I suspected was not a coincidence given that they'd apparently worked on a project together several years before. Month 1, for parcels closed, 12 hectares. Month 2, 6 parcels, 21 additional hectares. Total acquired, 33. Month 3, the family trust parcel to the north began moving. 2 of the 6 beneficiaries were cooperative. 3 were neutral. 1 was not. The uncooperative beneficiary was a man named Goro Tanaka, 56 years old, who had been in a disagreement with the rest of his family about the trust assets for reasons that predated the land by a considerable margin. Yuna's assessment was direct. He doesn't want to sell. He also doesn't want anyone else in the family to benefit from the sale. The land is a proxy for something else. I called him directly. The conversation was short. Tanaka was not hostile, just immovable in the specific way of someone who has decided that a position is a position and moving from it would mean admitting something he wasn't prepared to admit. I didn't push. I listened. At the end of the call I said, I'm not going to ask you to agree with your family. I'm asking you to allow a transaction that benefits 5 other people, on the understanding that your share will be held in a separate designated account, managed independently, with no commingling with theirs. Your decision on your share remains entirely yours, separate from theirs. A long silence. You're saying I can say yes without agreeing with them. That's exactly what I'm saying. He thought about it for 2 weeks. Then he signed. Cost, a separately structured payout account, and an additional 3% premium on Tanaka's individual share. Return, the northern parcel, unlocked. Month 4, Northern Trust closed. 14 more hectares. Month 5, environmental assessment on the eastern parcel came back clean. The drainage issue had been resolved by a remediation project 8 years ago, and the flag had never been updated. 3 weeks to clear the paperwork. 11 hectares. Month 6, 22 more parcels over 3 months, ranging from a single retired couple who decided immediately once Yuna explained the terms, to a small holding company that required 4 rounds of negotiation and a restructured payment schedule before they agreed. By the end of month 8 of the acquisition process, the total stood at 92 hectares. 8 short. 1 parcel remaining of any significant size. Bariki's. I called him on a Thursday morning. He picked up immediately. You've been busy, he said. 92 hectares. I know. A pause. Yuna's good. She is. I didn't ask how he knew the number. You have 8 hectares directly south of my current fence line. Without it, the southern section of Zone 2 has a gap that affects road access, utility routing, and the eventual footprint of the anchor structure I'm planning for that corner. I know what I have, he said. What do you want for it? Silence. Longer than his usual pauses. Long enough that it was deliberate. I've been thinking about this since you started the acquisition process, he said. You've been careful. You didn't signal the consolidation. You ran it through a clean entity, and you sequenced it correctly. I only knew because I have my own people watching regional land registry movements. Another pause. You're building something that will operate at a scale I didn't fully anticipate when I signed the advisory arrangement. The Zone 2 plan is larger than Phase 1, I said. Yes. How much larger? I told him. Not everything, but enough. The artificial sea. The clubs. The scope of what 100 hectares was going to become. Silence on the line. I want to revise the advisory arrangement, he said finally. Not the 5% of Zone 2. I want to add a seat on the main company board. Non-executive, advisory vote only, no operational authority. And I want the 8 hectares valued at replacement cost for what I had planned for it, not current agricultural value. Replacement cost was higher than market. Not dramatically, Bariki wasn't gouging, but meaningfully. I thought about what he was actually asking. Not the money. He didn't need the money. He wanted the board seat. He wanted formal acknowledgement that this project had grown beyond the category he'd originally placed it in. The board seat, I said. Advisory, no vote on financial decisions above a defined threshold without my approval. Replacement cost on the land. And I want your network, formally, as a defined deliverable of the arrangement. Not introductions when you feel like it. A structured relationship. He was quiet for a moment. Defined structured. We negotiated for 40 minutes. When we were done, Bariki had an advisory board seat and a formally defined network access arrangement. And I had 8 hectares and a man who had spent 3 years trying to acquire my original land parcel now working, with genuine interest, toward what I was building on it. The system updated that evening. Land acquisition complete. Total, 100 hectares. Zone 1 30 hectares, operational complex. Zone 2 70 hectares, development ready. Bariki, advisory board, defined network arrangement, 5% Zone 2. Objective 6 unlocked, Zone 2 development. Phase 1 structures, artificial sea, 18 hectares, 5 nightclub concepts, seafront promenade. I looked at the map. The complex, the casino, the hotel, the spa, the track, the arena, the restaurants, sat on 30 hectares in the upper left corner of what was now a 100-hectare site. 70 hectares of open land to the south and east. Nothing on it yet. Just the shape of what it was going to become. Toru appeared in the doorway of the site office. He looked at the map on my screen for a long moment. We're digging a sea, he said. It wasn't a question. He'd read the Zone 2 plans 2 weeks ago and had been processing them at the specific pace he processed things that required serious calculation. 18 hectares, I said. 4 to 6 meters deep. He was quiet. Then, I'll need a specialist groundworks contractor. What we did for the casino foundation is not the same as excavating 18 hectares to 6 meters and making it hold water. I know. Yuna is sourcing options. Japanese contractor, he said. There's a firm called Mizu. They built the Osaka Harbor extension. Groundwater management, artificial basin construction, full hydrological integration. If you're doing this properly, it's them. I made a note. Talk to Yuna. He nodded. Looked at the map one more time. Your father's 10 hectares, he said. You can't see them on this map anymore. They're just part of the site. I looked. He was right. The original parcel, the farmland that had started all of this, was somewhere in the upper section of the current 30 hectares, indistinguishable from everything built around it. He wanted me to start something, I said. Toru said nothing, which was his way of agreeing. Mizu sent 3 people to the initial site assessment. Not a proposal, not a brochure. 3 people, in boots, who spent 2 days walking the 70 hectares of Zone 2 with survey equipment and said almost nothing to anyone while they did it. The lead engineer was a woman named Sato Emi, 51 years old, who had overseen the Osaka Harbor extension and 2 artificial lake projects in Southeast Asia and moved across rough ground with the unhurried confidence of someone who has spent most of her career outdoors. On the 3rd day, she came to the site office and put her own map on the table next to mine. The ground profile is better than I expected, she said. You have a natural depression running through the central zone, 6 to 8 meters below grade across most of the planned basin footprint. That reduces your excavation volume by roughly 30% compared to flat ground. What does that mean for timeline? It means 8 months instead of 12, if you start immediately and run continuous shifts. She paused. There's one complication. There was always one complication. You have a natural water table at 3 to 4 meters in the eastern section of the basin. That's not a problem for the construction. We've managed worse, but it changes the sequencing. We need to manage groundwater extraction through the excavation phase before we can lay the basin liner. If we don't sequence it correctly, water migrates under the liner and you get movement in the base over time. Can you sequence it correctly? She looked at me the way engineers look at questions they consider obvious. That's what we do. Toru, who had been sitting quietly at the end of the table, said, What's your equipment mobilization time? They looked at each other, 2 people who spoke the same technical language recognizing that fact about each other, and had a separate conversation for about 10 minutes that I followed partially and understood mostly. The conclusion was that Mizu could mobilize within 6 weeks, and that Toru's existing crew would handle the perimeter and infrastructure work while Mizu ran the basin excavation. One condition, Sato said before she left. I run the basin phase independently. Your site foreman and I will coordinate on the boundary work, but inside the basin footprint, my team operates to my schedule and my standards. I've seen too many projects where divided authority in the excavation phase created problems that took longer to fix than the original construction. Toru said nothing, which was as close as he ever got to immediate agreement. I signed the Mizu contract that evening. Cost, basin construction contract, the largest single construction expenditure since the casino. Funded from Zone 1 operating cash flow, no additional debt required. Return, an 18-hectare artificial sea, built by the people who knew how to build it correctly. The excavation started on a Monday. By Friday of the first week, there were 40 pieces of heavy equipment on the Zone 2 site. Excavators, dump trucks, water extraction rigs, operating in 2 shifts around the clock. The noise carried to Zone 1. Kikuchi mentioned it to me one morning when I passed the stables, not as a complaint, just as an observation. Sounds like the land is being remade, he said. I told him it was. He nodded as if that explained something he'd been wondering about. The excavation ran for 5 months. During those 5 months, Zone 1 kept operating. The casino, the hotel, the track, the arena, the restaurants. The numbers had found a rhythm. Every month Toru handed me the construction report. Every month the system updated the Zone 1 figures. Every month the gap between what existed and what was being built felt slightly smaller. Month 2 of excavation, basin 40% complete. Groundwater extraction running on schedule. Sato's reports came through Toru in the same format as everything else. 1 page, specific numbers, no narrative. Month 3, the natural water table Sato had identified in the eastern section proved more active than the initial survey suggested. Not a crisis. She had anticipated variability, but it required an additional extraction rig and added 3 weeks to the eastern section timeline. She told me in a 3-line message. No alarm, no apology, just the fact and the revised schedule. I replied, understood. What do you need? She replied, The rig is already on order. That was the entire exchange. I found, over the course of the project, that working with people who were genuinely competent required very little management. Month 4. Basin 80% excavated. Liner installation beginning in the western section, while eastern excavation continued. The liner was a specific technical product, multi-layer, engineered for the load and water chemistry specifications Sato had designed, and it went in with the precision of something that had been manufactured to exact tolerances. Toru watched the liner installation for an afternoon and came back to the site office with the expression he wore when something had been done correctly. Month 5. Excavation complete. Liner complete. Filtration and circulation infrastructure installed. The basin sat empty, 18 hectares of engineered hollow, lined and ready, waiting for water. Sato stood at the edge of the eastern bank on the final inspection day and looked at it without visible satisfaction, which I was learning was her version of satisfaction. Fill sequence starts tomorrow, she said. Natural groundwater contribution plus supplementary input through the filtration system. At current inflow rates, surface level water in 32 days. And then you have a sea. The 5 nightclubs were designed during the excavation phase, which was Sato's idea. You're going to have 8 months of construction noise and dust in Zone 2, he said, 3 weeks into the excavation. Use the time. Design the clubs now, so the moment the basin is filled and the promenade is walkable, the entertainment is ready to open. You don't want a sea with nothing around it. It was the right instinct. I gave him the brief. 5 concepts, seafront positioning, different formats to serve different times of night and different kinds of guests. And he came back 2 weeks later with a document that was part business case, part creative brief, and entirely the product of 15 years of knowing what made people stay in a venue instead of leaving it. 5 concepts. Omi, open-air club directly on the waterfront. Capacity, 800. Summer primary venue. The one guests would photograph and share. Sato's note. This one is the advertisement for the other 4. Shindo, underground format, electronic music, low ceiling, no windows. The deliberate contrast to Omi. Capacity, 400. Sato's note. The guests who come here don't want a view. They want to disappear into the sound. Hana, club restaurant hybrid, Asian format. Dim sum service until 2 in the morning, live music transitioning to DJ sets after midnight. Capacity 600. Sato's note. This is for the guests who want to eat and stay, not eat and leave. Humo, private members club. 200 seats. No walk-in access. Application-based membership, 6-month waiting list from day 1 if positioned correctly. Sato's note. Price it so that being a member means something. The exclusivity is load-bearing. Yukio, floating platform on the sea surface. 120 seats. Reservation only, accessed by small boat from the promenade. Sato's note. 120 people on water, surrounded by the lights of everything else. There is no comparable experience on this site, and there shouldn't be. I read through all 5 concepts and the financial projections attached to each. Then I read them again. You designed these for the site, I said, when Sato came to discuss them. Each one uses the water differently. The sea is the asset, he said. The clubs activate it. If you build 5 clubs that could be anywhere, you've wasted the location. These only work here. I approved all 5 without changes. The construction ran parallel to the final months of basin excavation, the club structures going up along the promenade line while the basin was being lined. Toru coordinated with Sato's team on the waterfront interface, which required the specific kind of precise sequencing that he was built for. The promenade was 4 kilometers. That had been in the system's original Zone 2 plan. 4 kilometers of seafront walkway, connecting the clubs, the beach zones, the access points, the eventual additional structures that would come in later phases. It was the spine of Zone 2 the way the one-pass system was the spine of Zone 1. The thing that held everything else together and made it feel like one place instead of a collection of separate venues. Toru built it in sections, working outward from the Zone 1 boundary. The surface was a specific material, not concrete, not standard paving, something engineered for waterfront environments that would handle foot traffic, weather, and salt air over decades without requiring constant maintenance. Sato had recommended the specification. Toru had initially questioned the cost. When she sent him the 40-year maintenance comparison against standard alternatives, he stopped questioning it. Beach zones were designated at 4 points along the promenade, areas where the bank sloped gradually to the water, sand imported and graded to a specific profile, each one sized and positioned to create its own character. The system had specified their placement with characteristic precision. Beach zones should create separation between the club concepts while providing the neutral, low-commitment space that allows guests to transition between venues or simply remain on-site without entering any of them. The neutral space was the part one hadn't initially understood and had learned to take seriously. Not every guest wanted to be inside something. Some of them wanted to be in the vicinity of something, near the energy, near the light and sound, without the obligation of a reservation or a cover charge. Those guests spent money too, at the promenade bars and food stalls. And they came back, because the promenade had given them something they hadn't expected, space to just exist within the complex without feeling managed. The sea filled in 31 days, 1 day ahead of Sato's estimate. She sent a single message when the surface level reached grade. Complete. I was on site that morning. I walked the eastern promenade from the Zone 1 boundary to the far end of the basin and back. The water was still, the filtration system running quietly beneath the surface, the circulation infrastructure doing what it was designed to do. The morning light came at a low angle across the surface. The far bank was visible but distant. 18 hectares, 4 to 6 meters deep, 360 million liters of water. It looked, from the promenade, like a sea. Toru was at the far end when I got there. He had his hands in his pockets and was looking at the water with the expression he wore when something had come out exactly as the plan said it would, which was the closest he got to wonder. Basin integrity check is done, he said. Liner is holding. Circulation flow is within spec. Water chemistry is in range. He looked at it for another moment. Sato is good. She is. I told her that. What did she say? She said she knew. I looked at the water. Somewhere underneath us, 360 million liters were sitting in an engineered basin on land that 8 months ago had been farmland and scrub. In 30 days, the clubs would open. The promenade was complete. The beach zones were graded and ready. And then my phone showed the system notification. Zone 2, Phase 1 complete. Artificial sea, 18 hectares, operational. Promenade, 4 kilometers, complete. Nightclubs, 5 concepts, construction complete, opening in 30 days. Beach zones, 4 ready. Zone 2, Phase 2 unlocked. Private jet airport. Minimum runway, 1,800 meters. Land allocated, 9 hectares, northeastern Zone 2 boundary. Note, airport functions as inbound infrastructure, not revenue center. Every guest arriving by private jet bypasses regional ground transport and arrives directly on site. Model the value accordingly. Additional note, Zone 1 plus Zone 2 combined capacity, at current utilization, will reach ceiling within 18 months. Begin planning Zone 3 acquisition. I read the last line twice. Zone 3. I showed the screen to Toru. He read it. Looked up. How much land for Zone 3? He asked. It doesn't say yet. He looked back at the water. It's going to be more than 100 hectares. Probably. He nodded slowly, the way he nodded when he was already calculating something. Then he took his hands out of his pockets and turned away from the sea. I'll need a bigger crew, he said, and walked back toward the site office. The clubs opened on a Friday night in early autumn. Not all 5 simultaneously. Saito had argued against that from the first planning conversation. You open everything at once and you split the crowd, he said. You get 5 half-full venues instead of 1 full one. The first impression of each concept should be a full room. Sequence them. So we sequenced them. Omi first, the open-air waterfront club, the one Saito had called the advertisement. 800 capacity. We had 400 founding members with Zone 2 access priority, and Saito had managed the invitation list for the remaining 400 with the specific care of someone who understood that the first crowd in a room defined what kind of room it became. I stood on the promenade at 10 in the evening and watched 800 people on a lit terrace above dark water. The sea reflected the light back in a way I hadn't fully anticipated. The surface moving slightly from the circulation system beneath, breaking the reflections into something that looked less engineered and more alive than the construction plans had suggested it would. Saito appeared beside me. He was looking at the water too. The reflection was your margin of error, he said. What do you mean? The club would have worked without the sea. The lighting, the music, the design, it's a good room. But the sea makes it something else. He paused. You can't photograph what that actually looks like. People are going to come because someone told them about it and they needed to see it themselves. By midnight, the first social posts were circulating. By 2 in the morning, the Omi reservation system had requests for the following 3 weekends. Cost of opening night, production, hospitality, staff, standard operating expense, return, a full room and 3 weeks of advance bookings before the sun came up. Shindo opened the following weekend. Underground, low ceiling, no windows, capacity 400. Saito had booked a specific DJ for the opening, someone with a following in the electronic music community who had been looking for a venue in the region with the right acoustic specification. The sound system in Shindo had been engineered to a standard that Saito had specified and Toru had initially described as excessive until Saito explained, with unusual patience, that in a venue where the entire experience was sound, the sound system was not an amenity. It was the product. 400 people in a room built for sound, underground, with no visual reference to the sea above them. And then, at 1 in the morning, Saito had arranged for the DJ to cut the music for 45 seconds and play a single ambient track that was, quietly, the sound of water. Nobody knew where it was coming from. The room had no windows. He told me about it afterward. I asked why. Because they're 12 meters below a sea they walked past to get here, he said. I wanted them to remember that. Hana opened in week 3. The club restaurant hybrid, dim sum until 2, live music transitioning to sets after midnight. Yoshida had curated the food program personally, which Saito had negotiated as part of the Zone 2 F&B integration. The result was a kitchen that ran at restaurant standard in a room that felt like a club, which was a combination that turned out to be significantly more difficult to execute than either component alone. The first 2 service weeks had problems, timing conflicts between kitchen output and music transitions, a staffing structure that didn't map cleanly onto a venue that was simultaneously a restaurant and a nightclub. Fumio Nakano, who had quietly extended his operational involvement from the arena into Zone 2 coordination, spent 3 days in the kitchen and the floor simultaneously, mapping the problem in the specific methodical way he approached everything. His solution was a shift structure that treated the evening in 3 distinct operational phases: restaurant mode, transition, club mode, with different staff ratios and different service priorities in each. Simple in concept, difficult to implement. By week 3 it was running correctly. Humo opened in week 4. The Private Members Club. Saito had managed the founding membership list with more care than anything else in the Zone 2 opening sequence. 200 members. The criteria were not financial. Income above a certain level was assumed for anyone likely to apply, so using it as a filter would have been both obvious and insufficient. The actual criteria were social, professional standing, network relevance, and a specific preference for people who moved between industries rather than operating only within one. A club full of people from the same world becomes an industry gathering, Saito had said. A club full of people from different worlds becomes something more interesting. The waiting list opened the same day Kumo did. 314 applications in the first week. Saito reviewed each one himself. Yukio was last. The floating platform. 120 seats on a structure anchored in the center of the sea, accessed by small electric boats that departed from a dedicated dock on the promenade every 40 minutes. Reservation only. The boat ride was 4 minutes each way. Saito had timed it specifically, long enough to feel like a transition from the promenade to somewhere separate, short enough not to become an inconvenience. The opening reservation slots had sold out in 11 hours. Saito had released them quietly, without announcement, through the founding member network. They were gone before anyone outside that network knew they existed. The first guests arrived on a Saturday evening. I watched the first boat leave the dock from the promenade, 8 people in the dim light heading across dark water toward a lit platform in the middle of an artificial sea. I thought about the farmland this had been. Then I stopped thinking about it, because there was too much else to think about. Month 1, Zone 2 clubs. Omi, $980,000. Shindo, $620,000. Hana, $840,000. Kumo, $1,100,000. Membership fees, plus event revenue. Promenade bars and food stalls. The neutral space revenue Saito had predicted, $680,000. Zone 2 total, Month 1, $4,650,000. Combined complex monthly. Zone 1 gross, $48,100,000. Zone 2 gross, $4,650,000 and climbing. Total gross, $52,750,000. Net operating income, $18,900,000. The system updated. Objective 6 complete. Zone 2 clubs, 5 operational. Zone 2 month, 1 revenue, $4,650,000. Combined NOI, $18,900,000 per month. Objective 7 confirmed. Private jet airport. Runway specification, 1,800 meters minimum. Land allocated, 9 hectares, northeastern Zone 2 boundary. Investment partner identified, Kodama Aviation Holdings. Note, introduction available through Bariki Network. Kodama was 58 years old and had been in aviation his entire professional life. Charter operations, ground handling, 2 regional airports as minority stakeholder. He was, according to Bariki's introduction, the person in the country who best understood the operational and regulatory requirements for a private aviation facility at the scale I was planning. He came to the site on a Tuesday, looked at the Zone 2 map for about 10 minutes, walked the northeastern boundary with me, and then sat in the site office and said, "The runway orientation is going to be constrained by the highway corridor to the west and the sea basin to the south. You have one viable alignment." He showed me on the map. He was right. There was exactly one alignment that gave 1,800 meters without conflicting with existing infrastructure. Flight path clearance? I asked. Manageable. You're not near a controlled airspace boundary. The approach path over the eastern Zone 2 land is clear. You'll need a noise assessment for the planning authority, but at this scale and this distance from the nearest residential area, it won't be an obstacle. Timeline. Runway construction is not the long part. The long part is the Air Navigation Service Agreement and the handling certification. If you start the regulatory process today and run it in parallel with construction, you open in 14 months. What do you want to make that happen? He had clearly thought about this before arriving. Operational partnership in the terminal and handling facility. Not equity in your company. A separate joint venture for the aviation infrastructure. 50-50 on the terminal operations. You fund the construction. I fund the regulatory process and bring the operational certifications. I looked at the structure. He was offering expertise in regulatory relationships in exchange for an equal share of the infrastructure he would be helping to build. The construction funding sat with me, the larger capital exposure, but the regulatory path was where private aviation projects typically died, and he was offering to own that problem. 40-60, I said. You at 60 on operations, you're carrying the certification risk. I take 40. Construction funding remains mine. He thought about it. The handling fees flow through the joint venture? Everything aviation flows through the joint venture. The airport functions as infrastructure for the complex. I'm not building it as a standalone revenue center. The value is in what it brings here, not what it generates at the runway. He nodded slowly. He understood that logic. It was the system's logic, which I had spent enough time with to have internalized completely. The airport was a pump. Its value was measured in who it delivered, not in landing fees. 60-40, I operate, you fund construction, he said. And I want a first right of refusal if you ever consider expanding the aviation infrastructure beyond the current specification. Done. We shook hands. Kodama left to begin the regulatory filing process the same afternoon. Construction on the airport runway began 6 weeks later. It ran alongside the ongoing Zone 2 development, the promenade in full operation, the clubs finding their rhythm, the beach zones filling at weekends. The Zone 2 site was no longer a construction project that happened to have some operational areas. It was an operational complex that happened to have an active construction zone in the northeastern corner. Toru managed the sequencing with the same precision he'd applied to everything else, coordinating Mizu's remaining snagging work on the sea basin, the runway groundworks contractor, and his own crew's work on the Zone 2 road and utility infrastructure simultaneously. I asked him one morning how he tracked all of it. Same way you run the complex, he said. You know what each piece needs, and you don't confuse one piece's problems with another piece's problems. I thought about that for a moment. That's not as simple as it sounds. No, he said. It isn't. He handed me the weekly report and walked away. The first private jet landed on a Thursday afternoon, 14 months after Kodama and I had shaken hands in the site office. It was a Gulfstream G650 arriving from Tokyo. 8 passengers. The terminal, a lounge, not a processing facility, designed to the same standard as the Kumo Members Club in terms of material quality and spatial generosity, was ready. Ground handling was Kodama's team, running smoothly from their first operation because Kodama had spent 14 months making sure they would. The 8 passengers cleared the terminal in 11 minutes from wheels down and were in the complex casino within 25 minutes of landing. I watched the arrival on the terminal camera feed from my office. 25 minutes from Tokyo to a seat at the table. Kodama called that evening. Clean operation, he said. My team performed well. They did. How many confirmed inbounds next week? 6 aircraft. 14 the week after. Word moves fast in that community when a new facility works correctly the first time. I looked at the Zone 2 map. The runway sat in the northeastern corner. A clean 1,800-meter strip with a compact terminal at the southern end, integrated into the Zone 2 road network so that arrivals flowed directly into the complex without touching the public highway at all. The system had called it a pump. Standing at the window looking at the Zone 2 site in the early evening, the sea catching the last light, the promenade lit along its full 4-kilometer length, the clubs beginning their evening operational cycle. I understood that word differently now than I had when I first read it. A pump didn't just move things from one place to another. A pump created pressure, and pressure, applied correctly, made things flow in the direction you needed them to go. Month 2, Zone 2 and airport combined. Clubs, Month 2, $5,200,000. Kumo membership list now at capacity. Yukio wait list extending to 11 weeks. Airport, landing fees, handling, terminal, $890,000. Joint venture, Kenji's 40%, $356,000. Promenade and beach, $820,000. Zone 2 total, $6,270,000. Combined complex, Zone 1, $48,100,000. Zone 2, $6,270,000. Total gross, $54,370,000. Net operating income, $21,400,000. The system updated at midnight. Objective 7 complete. Airport, operational. First month handling, 23 aircraft. Combined NOI, $21,400,000 per month. Objective 8 unlocked. Zone 2 anchor structure, aquapark. Minimum 12 hectares. Location, Southern Zone 2, waterfront adjacent. Operational target, largest aquapark in the region. Zone 3 advisory. Land acquisition window is narrowing. Regional property values in surrounding area have increased 23% since Zone 2 groundbreaking became public. Recommend initiating Zone 3 acquisition within 60 days. Delay will significantly increase acquisition cost. I read the Zone 3 advisory twice. 23% increase. Because people had noticed what was happening here, and land near something that was clearly working had started to price against that fact. Yuna had told me this would happen. The moment Zone 2 construction became visible from the highway, she had said, 6 months ago, the regional land market started moving. You have a window. When it closes, you pay a different price. The window was 60 days. I called Yuna at 11 at night. She picked up on the second ring. The same instinct as Bariki, I noted, which said something about the kind of people who operated at this level. Zone 3, I said. How much land and where? A pause. Not surprised. She'd been expecting this. I've been watching 3 areas. How much do you need? The system hasn't specified yet. But the aquapark needs 12 hectares in Zone 2, which leaves 58 hectares in Zone 2 for everything else. Zone 3 needs to be large enough for whatever comes after that. Whatever comes after that, she repeated. Do you know what that is? I looked at the Zone 2 map. The sea, the clubs, the promenade, the airport, the aquapark site, not yet broken ground. I thought about the system's original description, delivered to me in a half-lit apartment the night after my father's funeral. Everything that gives people pleasure and takes their money. Not specifically, I said, but I know the direction. Then give me 2 days, she said. I'll have a Zone 3 land assessment ready. We start moving within the week. She hung up. I sat at my desk for a while. Outside, the Zone 2 promenade was still lit. The sea was dark beyond it, the basin surface invisible at this hour except where the Yukio platform caught the light, a small bright point in the middle of all that engineered water. $21 million a month, net. And the system was telling me we were not close to finished. I thought, briefly, about the poker table. The specific feeling of waiting for a card that might or might not come. The way that feeling had been the most alive I'd known how to feel for a long time. It seemed, from where I was sitting now, like a very small game. Yuna's Zone 3 assessment arrived 47 hours after the call. 11 pages. Color-coded. 3 acquisition scenarios at different price points, with timeline projections for each and a clear recommendation at the end that she'd evidently spent the second of those 47 hours writing with the specific care of someone who knew the recommendation was going to be acted on. The recommendation was Scenario B, not the cheapest option. That was Scenario A, which captured fewer hectares at lower prices, but left gaps in the site geometry that would constrain future development in ways that couldn't be fully anticipated yet. Not the most aggressive option. Scenario C was faster, but moved on too many parcels simultaneously, which Yuna's note described as creating a consolidation signal in the regional market that will reprice the remaining parcels before we can close them. Scenario B, 140 hectares, 62 parcels, 14 months. A specific sequencing that started at the parcels furthest from the current complex, where price sensitivity to the development was lowest, and moved inward, closing the strategically critical parcels last, when the surrounding transactions had reduced the leverage of any remaining holdouts. I read it twice. Then I called her. Scenario B, I said. I thought so. I'll start this week. Same structure as Zone 2. Clean acquisition entity, separate from the complex. I've already set one up. Ayako signed off on the structure yesterday. A pause. I anticipated the call. I looked at the Zone 3 map overlay sheet included, the current 100 hectares of Zones 1 and 2, and then the proposed Zone 3 boundary spreading outward in every direction, more than doubling the total site. 240 hectares. Combined. One thing, Yuna said, before I could respond to that. There are 4 parcels in the northern section that are owned by a single entity, a property fund registered offshore. I can't identify the beneficial owner through standard registry research. Before we approach that entity, I need to know who we're talking to. Why? Because offshore property funds with unidentified beneficial ownership in a regional land consolidation can mean one of two things. Either it's a passive investor who doesn't know or care what we're building and will sell at the right price, or it's someone who knows exactly what we're building and is positioning to extract a premium. She paused. The difference matters before we open negotiations. How long to identify them? I have someone who can run the structure in a week. It will cost money, and it won't be visible on any official record. Do it. She hung up. I noted, not for the first time, that the people who were genuinely good at their jobs rarely needed more instruction than the direction of travel. The aquapark design process started the same week. The system specification was detailed, more detailed than the guidance it had given for any previous structure. 12 hectares minimum, waterfront adjacent, positioned to use the sea as both a visual backdrop and a functional extension of the water experience. Regional record for slide count. Year-round operation through a combination of outdoor and enclosed sections. Family segment prioritized. That last point, the system had flagged it specifically. Family visitors have the highest return rate of any guest segment and the longest average site duration. A family that spends 6 hours at the aquapark will eat 2 meals and 1 snack on site. They will return within 3 months at a rate of 64%. Build for them. I brought in a specialist design firm, Aqua Design Partners, based in Singapore, who had built 7 aquaparks across Asia in the past 12 years. Their lead designer was a man named Park who flew in for the initial site meeting and spent most of it looking at the sea and saying very little. At the end of the site walk, he turned to me and said, "The sea changes this completely." In what way? Most aquaparks are self-contained. You come in, you use the slides, you leave. The experience is the rides. He looked at the waterfront. If we position the aquapark so that guests move between the park and the sea, if the sea becomes an extension of the water experience rather than a backdrop, you have something that doesn't have a comparison point. There's nothing else that looks like this. What does that require structurally? A transition zone. A section of the promenade where the aquapark boundary opens onto the beach zones without requiring guests to exit one venue and re-enter another. The sea and the park become one continuous water environment with different zones within it. I thought about the system's instruction on neutral space, the beach zones designed to let guests exist without feeling managed. The transition zone Park was describing was the same logic applied at the boundary between 2 major venues. Design it that way, I said. He nodded and went back to looking at the sea. The design phase took 8 weeks. What came back was not what I had expected, which was high in every respect: slide count, enclosed section size, operational capacity. But what surprised me was the wave pool. 3 hectares, the largest single element in the park. Park's explanation was characteristically direct. The wave pool is where families spend the most time. The slides are the reason they come. The wave pool is the reason they stay. Size it for staying. 22 slides. For record height for the region. The system had been specific about that, and Park had delivered specifications that cleared the regional records by margins that would stand for several years. A children's section that Yoshida had, unexpectedly, asked to be involved in designing the food and beverage component for. His observation being that families with children represented an entirely separate culinary brief from the evening dining he usually operated within, and that he found the problem interesting. The enclosed section, designed for year-round operation, climate-controlled, connected to the outdoor section by a transition that allowed guests to move between them without changing facilities. Toru's specification for that transition had taken 2 weeks of back and forth with Park's structural team and had produced a solution that both of them were satisfied with, which I had learned was the closest either of them came to enthusiasm about a design outcome. Construction began 9 weeks after the initial site meeting. 12 hectares in the southern Zone 2 section, waterfront boundary running 200 meters alongside the promenade. The transition zone Park had designed was visible in the groundworks from the first week. The boundary between the aquapark footprint and the promenade, not a wall or a fence, but a graduated grade change. The levels shifting across 20 meters of landscaping until the promenade surface and the aquapark entry plaza were at the same elevation. Zone 3 acquisition ran on its own clock. Month 1, 8 parcels, 19 hectares, the furthest from the complex, exactly as Yuna had sequenced. Simple transactions. Landowners who had no particular attachment to the parcels and received a clean offer at a fair price from an entity they had no reason to connect to anything larger. The offshore fund identity came back after 11 days. Yuna called at 7 in the morning, which meant she considered it urgent. The beneficial owner of the northern parcels is a company called Sunrise Capital Partners, she said, registered in the Caymans. The ultimate beneficial owner, through 2 holding layers, is Ryota Minda. I didn't know the name. Who is Ryota Minda? He's a developer. 53 years old, based in Tokyo, mid-size operation. He built 3 mixed-use complexes in the past 8 years, none of them in this region. She paused. He bought those 4 parcels 14 months ago, 6 weeks after Zone 2 groundbreaking became visible from the highway. 14 months ago. Zone 2 groundbreaking had become visible approximately 14 months ago. He saw the construction start and bought land. I said, yes, for parcels, 19 hectares, northern Zone 3 boundary. He paid slightly above market at the time, not dramatically, but enough to move quickly. Another pause. He's been holding since then. He hasn't done anything with them. He's waiting. He's waiting for you to need them, she said, or for the surrounding transactions to tell him what the land is now worth to someone who is consolidating at scale. I thought about it. The northern parcels weren't critical to Zone 3 geometry. They were valuable, but not structurally essential in the way Ando's connector parcel had been for Zone 2. Yuna had positioned them in the middle of the acquisition sequence precisely because they had less leverage than their location suggested. How does the Zone 3 geometry work if we exclude his parcels entirely? A pause while she checked something. It works. You lose some depth in the northern section. Your development footprint there is shallower, but the core Zone 3 structures all fit within the remaining parcels. Then let him wait, I said. Don't approach his entity. Continue the sequence around his parcels. Let him watch every parcel adjacent to his close. When he's the last significant holdout in the northern section, he'll call us. Yuna was quiet for a moment. That's what I would have recommended. How long until he's the last holdout? At current pace, 6 months. Then we have 6 months of other things to think about. The aquapark opened on a Saturday in late spring, 8 months after groundbreaking. Day 1 attendance, 22,000 people. That number came from Fumio, who had extended his operational coordination from the arena and Zone 2 clubs to include the aquapark entry management system, a role he had proposed himself 3 months into aquapark construction, on the basis that the venue operational complexity was similar in structure to the arena, and he already understood the site. 22,000 people in a single day was a regional attendance record. The system had projected 18,000 as the optimistic opening day scenario. 22,000 was beyond that. The reason, which became clear in the first operational review, was the transition zone. Guests were not counting the aquapark and the promenade as separate experiences. They were moving between them continuously, from the slides to the promenade beach zones to the sea to the outdoor pools and back again. The average time on site was not the 4 to 5 hours that aquapark benchmark suggested. It was 7 hours and 40 minutes. 7 hours and 40 minutes. 2 meals, 2 snacks, multiple drink purchases. Return booking rate from exit surveys, 71% within 90 days. The system had said 64%. The transition zone had pushed it to 71. Park received a message from me the evening of opening day. 2 words, you were right. He replied in 4. I usually am. Congratulations. Month 1, Aquapark, ticket revenue, $4,800,000. Food and beverage, Yoshida family section plus main concessions $2,100,000. Retail and photography, $380,000. Total Aquapark monthly, $7,280,000. Combined complex, post-Aquapark, Zone 1, $48,100,000. Zone 2 including Aquapark, $13,550,000. Total gross, $61,650,000. Net operating income, $26,800,000. I looked at those numbers for a long time. $26.8 million. Net, monthly. 18 months ago the casino had opened with a month 1 NOI of $6.2 million, which I had stared at for a long time because it had seemed, in that moment, like an enormous number. 6.2 had become 26.8. The system updated. Objective 8 complete. Aquapark, operational. Day 1 attendance, 22,000, regional record. Month 1 NOI contribution, $7,280,000. Combined NOI, $26,800,000 per month. Zone 2, fully operational. Zone 3, acquisition at 31% completion, Yuna's report. Objective 9 unlocked. Zone 3 anchor structures. Planning phase. Note, Zone 3 development should proceed in parallel with continued Zone 2 optimization. Combined site now operating at a scale that requires organizational structure review. Recommend formalizing management layers before Zone 3 construction begins. Additional note, Ryota Minda's 4 northern parcels remain uncontacted. Adjacent transactions, 14 of 16 closed. He will initiate contact within 45 days. I called Yuna immediately. 45 days, I said. The system says 45 days? The system says 45 days. A pause. My estimate was 6 months. 45 days means the adjacent closings are moving faster than I projected. Another pause, shorter. He's watching the registry more closely than I assumed. Are we ready when he calls? I'll be ready in 30 days. Then be ready in 30. I ended the call and looked at the combined site map, zones 1, 2, and the emerging zone 3 parcels filling in around the edges. The complex had a shape now that was visible from above. The original 10 hectares of casino and hotel buried somewhere in the upper section, surrounded by everything that had grown from it in 2 years. It looked, from above, like a city under construction. It looked, more precisely, like the beginning of one. The management structure conversation happened the following week. Not at my request, at Toru's. He came to the site office on a Monday morning, set his weekly report on the table, and then instead of leaving, sat down. He had never sat down in the site office for a non-essential conversation in the 2 years he'd been on the project. I waited. You have 22 operational venues, he said. Zone 2 fully running. Zone 3 acquisition active. Aquapark open. Airport handling 20-plus aircraft a week. Arena running 3 events a month. He paused. And you're still making every decision yourself. I'm not making every decision. You're making every decision that matters. He looked at me steadily. When we started, that was correct. There were 10 people on this project, and the complexity fit inside one person's head. It doesn't anymore. He paused again. Zone 3 is going to be larger than Zones 1 and 2 combined, if the acquisition footprint is what I think it is. 140 hectares. He nodded, as if confirming a calculation. You need a structure. People who own define parts of this and are accountable for them independently. Not because you can't manage it, because the project will stop being able to grow at the pace it's been growing if every decision routes through one point. I thought about the systems note. Organizational structure review. Toru had reached the same conclusion independently, which meant it was not a suggestion. It was a fact about the stage the project had reached. Who do you have in mind? I asked. He had, of course, already thought about this. Fumio Nakano, Operations Director, Zone 2 and Aquapark. He had already been functioning in that role informally. Formalizing it gave him authority and accountability in equal measure. Saito, Creative and Entertainment Director. All bookings, all club programming, all event strategy across both zones. Yoshida, Food and Beverage Director. All restaurant and hospitality concepts across the complex. Ayako, General Counsel. She was already functioning as this, but without the formal title that would allow her to act with appropriate authority in external negotiations. Yuna, Head of Land Acquisition, Zone 3 and beyond. Kodama, Aviation Operations, through the joint venture, with a formal liaison role to the complex management structure. Toru himself, Chief Construction Officer, a title he had never asked for and probably didn't care about, but which would allow him to engage with Zone 3 contractors at the appropriate level of authority. And you, Toru said. And me what? You need a title too. Something that means what you actually are. I thought about that. The system had never given me a title. It had given me tasks and objectives, and the specific information required to complete them. What I was had been defined by what I did, not by what I was called. Chief Executive, I said. It's accurate. Toru looked at me. Your father would have used that title. I know. He stood up, picked up his report, paused at the door. He would have liked this building, he said. Not the complex. The word he used was specific. This building. The casino. The one we'd poured the foundation for in month 3, when there was nothing else here yet. He left before I could respond. I sat in the site office for a while after he'd gone. Outside, Zone 2 was fully operational. The promenade lit, the sea catching the afternoon light, the aquapark visible at the southern end of the site. The airport showed 2 aircraft on the handling area. The arena marquee was up for the following weekend's event. 22 venues. 26.8 million a month. A management structure that was being formalized this week because the complexity had grown past what one person could hold. Somewhere in all of that, buried under 2 years of construction and negotiation and decisions and numbers, was a 10-hectare parcel of farmland that an old man had passed to his son in a hospital room and asked him to do something real with. I thought, not for the first time, that he would have had something to say about this. I thought, also not for the first time, that I no longer knew whether it would have been approval or something more complicated than that, and that the not knowing had stopped bothering me somewhere along the way, which was perhaps its own kind of answer. Ryota Minda called on a Tuesday morning, 38 days after the system had predicted 45. I was in the middle of a Zone 3 planning meeting with Toru and Yuna when the call came through. Unknown number, Tokyo area code. I excused myself and took it in the corridor. Kenji. Not a question. He knew who he was calling. My name is Ryota Minda. I believe you've been acquiring land around my northern parcels for the past several months. His voice was measured. Not hostile, not nervous. The voice of a man who had decided on his approach before dialing and was executing it. I'm aware of your parcels, I said. I'd like to discuss them. I thought you might. When can you be here? A pause, brief, but real. He'd expected more preamble. Thursday, he said. Thursday works. My office, 10 in the morning. He arrived exactly on time, which told me he'd been in the region since at least the previous evening. 53 years old, well-dressed in the specific, understated way of someone who has earned their money rather than inherited it. and with the alert stillness of a person accustomed to reading rooms before speaking in them. I showed him the complex first. Not because it was necessary, he had clearly done his research, but because there is a difference between knowing what something is from documentation and standing inside it while it operates. We walked Zone 1, then the promenade, then the sea. The aqua park was visible across the water. The airport had 2 aircraft on the handling area. OMI was closed in the morning, but the promenade was already carrying foot traffic from hotel guests and early visitors. Minda said nothing for most of the walk. At the southern end of the promenade, looking across the sea toward the aqua park, he finally spoke. How long did this take? 2.5 years from the first foundation pour. Another silence. I built 3 complexes in 8 years. None of them look like this. He wasn't being deferential, just precise. He was a developer, and he was making a technical assessment. What are you planning for Zone 3? That depends partly on this conversation. He looked at me. My 4 parcels. 19 hectares. What do you need them for? Depth in the northern section. Without them, the northern Zone 3 development is shallower than the master plan calls for. With them, it connects cleanly. How much are they worth to you? It was the direct question of a man who had decided that circling the topic was a waste of both their time. I thought about how to answer it. The system was quiet. It had given me Minda's name and the 45-day timeline, but nothing about the negotiation itself. Whatever happened in this room was mine. At current market, given regional appreciation, approximately 30% above what you paid 14 months ago, I said. That's the number I'd offer to anyone in a standard transaction. I'm not a standard transaction. No. You identified the consolidation early, moved quickly, and held without panic while everything around you closed. That's not passive investing. That's a strategic position. He looked at me with the expression of someone waiting to hear whether the next thing would be useful. So I'm not offering you market plus 30, I said. I'm offering you a choice. Market plus 30, clean exit, you take your profit and move on. Or, I paused, a role in Zone 3 development. Not equity in the main company. A development partnership on a specific Zone 3 structure. You bring your construction experience and your capital. I bring the land integration and the existing infrastructure. We build something together. The silence that followed was longer than any previous one. What structure? He asked finally. I don't know yet. Zone 3 planning is in early phase. The anchor structures haven't been finalized. I looked at him. But you built 3 mixed-use complexes. You understand scale. The conversation about what goes in the northern Zone 3 section would be more interesting with someone who has actually built at that level involved in it. Minda looked at the sea for a long moment. Then back at me. I came here to sell the parcels, he said. I know. You're telling me not to. I'm telling you there's a second option. If the first one is what you want, the offer stands. Market plus 30, transfer next week. He was quiet again. A longer quiet this time. The kind that meant actual thinking rather than tactical positioning. The development partnership, he said. What's the governance structure? Defined by the specific project. Not a general partnership in the company. A project-level joint venture for whichever Zone 3 structure we agree on. You have operational authority within that structure, subject to master plan compliance and site coordination with Toru. Toru is your construction director. Chief Construction Officer. Yes. I've heard of him. He said it the way people say things they want the other person to know they've done their research. He has a reputation. He's earned it. Minda looked at the water one more time. Then he turned fully toward me with the decisiveness of someone who had finished thinking and was ready to move. I'll take the partnership conversation. I'm not committing to a structure I haven't seen the details of, but I'll stay in the region for the week and work through the Zone 3 planning data with your team. A pause. If the project is what it looks like, I won't want to sell. Then let's see if the project is what it looks like. He stayed for 4 days. He and Toru spent most of the second day together, which Toru had not been asked to do and had arranged himself after reviewing Minda's project portfolio overnight. I found out about it when Toru mentioned it in passing at the end of the day, with the tone he used for things he considered self-evident. He knows construction, Toru said. From Toru, that was an endorsement. Minda left on Friday with a term sheet for a Zone 3 hotel complex in the northern section, his development, his capital, his operational management, within the master plan parameters. The land question resolved itself. The parcels stayed in his name and were folded into the joint venture structure as his contribution. He hadn't sold. He'd built something instead, which, I was learning, was always the more interesting outcome. Zone 3 broke ground 6 weeks later. Not all of it. The acquisition was still running. Yuna's sequence moving through the remaining parcels at the pace she had calculated and maintained without deviation. But the parcels already closed were enough to begin infrastructure, roads, utilities, the foundational grid that Zone 3 would build on. Toru's crew expanded. He hired 3 additional site managers to run concurrent work streams, Zone 3 infrastructure, ongoing Zone 2 optimization work, and the coordination interface with Minda's construction team in the northern section. He managed all 3 with the same one-page weekly reports, 3 separate documents now instead of 1, delivered every Friday without variation. The management structure that had been formalized after his conversation with me began to show its effect within the first month. Fumio ran Zone 2 in the aquapark without daily input from me. He sent a weekly summary, operational metrics, staff issues, guest satisfaction data, and raised specific questions when they arose. The questions were increasingly rare. He had learned the venue the way Kikuchi had learned his land, by daily contact over enough time that the problems announced themselves before they became serious. Saito managed the entertainment calendar across Zones 1 and 2 with an independence that had been implicit in his arrangement from the beginning but was now formalized. He booked 3 months out, reported the calendar monthly, and came to me only when a booking decision had implications beyond his defined scope, which happened perhaps once every 6 weeks. The result was that my working day changed in character. Less operational firefighting, more planning, more of the conversations that determined what the next phase looked like rather than managing what the current phase was doing. I was not sure, at first, whether I preferred it. The operational intensity of the early years had a specific quality, every problem immediate, every solution visible, the feedback between decision and outcome compressed into days or weeks. Strategic planning operated on a longer horizon where the results of decisions taken now would not be visible for months or years. I mentioned this to Bariki at an advisory board meeting, 3 months into the new structure. He was the only person in the room who had been doing this for long enough to have an opinion worth listening to. He thought about it for a moment. In the early phase, you're building something, he said. In this phase, you're building something that builds things. The feedback loop is longer because the machine is larger. He paused. You get used to it. Or you hire someone who likes the operational intensity and you focus on the longer horizon. Some people can do both. Not many. I thought about whether I was one of those people. I didn't have a clear answer yet. Zone 3 acquisition completed in month 11 of the 14-month projection, 3 months ahead of schedule. Yuna's note on the final closing was characteristically sparse. Sequence held. 62 parcels. 140 hectares. All clean title. Minda's parcels folded into JV per agreement. Ready for development planning. 140 hectares. Added to the existing 100, the total site was now 240 hectares. I asked Yuna what that number represented in terms of comparable sites globally. She thought for a moment. There are 12 integrated entertainment and hospitality destinations in the world operating at above 200 hectares of contiguous developed land, she said. Most of them took between 15 and 30 years to reach that scale. How long have we been building? You broke ground on the casino 3 years and 2 months ago. I sat with that for a moment. The Zone 3 development plan, she said, moving on with the efficiency of someone who gives information and then waits for a decision. Do you want to present it to the full management team or work through it with Toru first? Toru first. Thursday. She made a note and left. I looked at the site map. 240 hectares. Zone 1 in the upper left corner. The casino, the hotel, the spa, the track, the arena, the restaurants, all of it familiar now, the place where this had started. Zone 2 spreading south and east from there. The sea, the promenade, the clubs, the airport, the aquapark. Zone 3 an incomplete outline around the southern and eastern edges. The acquisition parcel shaded in, but the structures not yet drawn. The structures not yet drawn. That was the part that required a decision. The Zone 3 planning meeting with Toru happened on Thursday as scheduled. He came with his own map, printed, annotated in the same 3 colors he'd used for every site plan since the beginning of the project, additions and notes in handwriting that had become familiar to me over 3 years in the way that another person's working method becomes familiar through sustained proximity. Zone 3 has 3 distinct sections, he said, without preamble, which was how all of his planning conversations began. Northern section, Minda's hotel complex, already in design. Eastern section, the largest contiguous block, 60 hectares. Southern section, the boundary with Zone 2, transitional, needs to extend the existing promenade logic. The eastern section, I said. That's the anchor question. Yes. He put his finger on the map. 60 hectares of uninterrupted flat land, eastern boundary with highway access that could support independent arrival infrastructure, groundwater profile similar to Zone 2. You could build almost anything here. The system says the airport is already built. What comes next for arrivals? He looked at me steadily. The system tells you what to build. I'm asking you what you want to build. It was an unusual question from Toru, who generally dealt in specifications rather than intentions. I thought he was asking something more specific than it sounded. The complex at full development, I said. What does it feel like to arrive here? He considered this. Right now, you land at the airport, you're processed through Kodama's terminal, you get into a car or a shuttle. You arrive at the Zone 1 boundary and you enter the complex. He paused. It works, but it's sequential. You experience the arrival and then the destination separately. What if you didn't? He looked at me. What if the arrival was part of the experience? I said. The eastern section, 60 hectares, highway access, space. What if Zone 3 arrival infrastructure was designed so that guests understood, from the moment they turned off the highway, that they were already inside something? Toru was quiet for a long moment. He looked at his map. Then he looked up. That's an urban design question, he said. Not a construction question. I know. Who do we need? Someone who designs cities, he said. Or something close to one. He left the meeting to make calls. By the end of the day, he had identified 3 firms. By the end of the week, I had a name. The firm was called Okamoto Urban, based in Osaka. Their lead partner was a woman named Reiko Okamoto, 61 years old, who had spent 35 years designing the public spaces of cities, not the buildings, but the spaces between them. The streets, the plazas, the transitions, the sequences of experience that determined how a place felt to move through rather than just to be in. Toru had described what we needed in a single sentence. We're not building a venue, he told them. We're building a place. Reiko Okamoto arrived the following Monday, stood at the Zone 3 eastern boundary for 2 hours without speaking to anyone, and then came to the site office and said, "Show me how people arrive now, and I'll show you how they should arrive." It was, I thought, exactly the right question. Reiko Okamoto spent 5 days on the site before she produced anything. Not idle days. She walked every meter of Zones 1 and 2, twice. She sat at different points on the promenade at different hours and watched how people moved. She stood at the Zone 1 entry point at 7 in the evening on a Friday, peak arrival, and counted, with a small clicker in her hand, how many people paused at the boundary between the highway car park and the complex, and how many walked through without breaking stride. 63% pause, she told me on the 5th day, at the entry point, for between 2 and 8 seconds. Then they proceed. Is that significant? It means 63% of your arriving guests experience a moment of disorientation. They've arrived, but they don't yet understand where they are or what direction to move in. She set a sketch on the table, not a plan, a sequence drawing, showing the transition from highway to complex as a series of spatial experiences. Arrival should not produce disorientation. Arrival should produce anticipation. Those are different feelings, and they require different design. I looked at the sketch. The Zone 1 entry was drawn as a single threshold, a line crossed, and then the complex opened in front of you all at once. What does anticipation look like, spatially? I asked. Sequence, she said. You don't show the whole thing at once. You reveal it. The guest sees a part, moves toward it, and as they do, the next part becomes visible. They're always moving toward something without being able to see the full extent of what they're entering. She paused. Las Vegas does this badly. It shows you everything from 100 meters away, and then you walk through a car park to get to it. The anticipation is destroyed before you arrive. What you're building can do it correctly. Because of the scale. Because of the scale, and because Zone 3 gives you the eastern approach corridor. 60 hectares between the highway and the existing complex. If you design that sequence correctly, a guest arriving from the east doesn't see the sea until they've been on site for 12 minutes. They experience the Zone 3 structures, the arrival boulevard, the eastern gardens, and then they turn a corner and the sea is there. She let that sit for a moment. That moment, she said, is worth more than anything you can build in a hotel room or a casino floor. Because it's unrepeatable. The first time you see it, it's a surprise. Every subsequent time, you're anticipating that surprise. The memory of it pulls you back. I thought about Sato's description of Umi opening night, the sea reflecting the light in a way the construction plans hadn't fully predicted, the thing that couldn't be photographed. Reiko was describing the same phenomenon at the scale of a journey rather than a moment. Design the eastern approach, I said. The full Zone 3 arrival sequence. What it looks like, how it moves, what a guest sees at each point. I need 8 weeks. You have 8 weeks. She went back to her sketches. While Reiko worked, the Zone 3 structures took shape in parallel. Minda's hotel complex in the northern section moved from term sheet to design within 6 weeks of his initial visit. He brought his own architect, a firm he had worked with on 2 previous projects, and the design process ran on his timeline, coordinating with Toru on site integration and with Iyako on the joint venture legal structure. The hotel was large. Not the largest thing on the site. The Aquapark held that distinction by footprint, but the most vertically significant, a 32-floor tower that would be visible from the highway at 15 kilometers. Minda had not mentioned this in any of our planning conversations. I saw it in the design submission and said nothing, because the master plan allowed it, and because a structure visible from 15 kilometers was not a problem. It was an advertisement. Toru said, reviewing the tower foundation specification, deep piles. He's not cutting corners on the base. He said it approvingly, which told me the Minda evaluation was now settled. The Southern Zone 3 section, the promenade extension, was Fumio's project in operational terms. He had proposed it himself, in a planning document that landed on my desk 6 weeks into the Zone 3 development phase, with the specific directness he had developed since taking the operations director role formally. The Zone 2 promenade ends at the Zone 3 boundary, he wrote. If Zone 3 development creates a new southern extent to the site, the promenade should extend to match it. Guests should not experience a boundary between zones. They should experience a continuous site. He had included cost estimates, a timeline, and a proposed contractor. All 3 were correct within margins I could verify from existing project data. I approved the extension the same day and asked him to coordinate with Reiko's team on the design language. The promenade extension should feel like the same place, not a newer section of it. Fumio, already arranged. He'd contacted Reiko's office before submitting the document. I had hired an operations director. What I had, somewhere in the past year, was someone who thought like a developer. Reiko's arrival sequence design came in on the last day of the 8-week window. Not a report. A presentation, physical drawings, rendered perspectives, a sequence of 37 images showing what a guest would see at each point of the eastern approach from the highway exit to the first view of the sea. Toru sat through the full presentation without moving. Bariki, who had asked to attend when he heard about it, sat beside him. The design proposed 5 distinct spatial experiences between the highway and the sea view. The first was the gateway. 2 structures flanking the arrival road at the Zone 3 eastern boundary. Not a gate, nothing that stopped you, but a defined threshold that told the arriving guest they had entered something. The brain needs a signal, Reiko said. Not a barrier. A signal. You cross the threshold, and something in your perception shifts. The second was the boulevard. 800 meters of arrival road lined with a specific landscape treatment. Not trees in the conventional sense, but a structured canopy that created filtered light above the road and drew the eye forward rather than upward. Width calibrated to make the road feel ceremonial without feeling oversized. The third was the Garden District, 6 hectares of Zone 3 eastern land developed as parkland and low-scale hospitality. Not hotels, not clubs, gardens, walking paths, small pavilions with food and beverage, a botanical element that the system had not specified but that Reiko had identified as necessary. You need a place to exhale before you inhale, she said. The garden is the exhale. The fourth was the Reveal Plaza, the transition point where the boulevard opened into a wider space and the guest, for the first time, could see across the full width of the complex. Not the sea yet. The Zone 1 Casino Tower, the Zone 2 Promenade buildings, the Aquapark at the far southern end. The scale of what they were inside becoming visible at once. The fifth was the sea view, reached by a specific path from the Reveal Plaza that oriented the guest toward the southern promenade. The moment of arrival at the water, 12 minutes after leaving their car, with the full spatial sequence of the approach behind them. 37 images. 37 moments in a sequence designed so that each one prepared the guest for the next. The room was quiet when she finished. Toru spoke first. The Garden District, he said. 6 hectares of park and pavilions. That's land not generating primary revenue. Correct, Reiko said. Justify it. She had clearly anticipated this. The Garden District increases average guest dwell time by an estimated 40 minutes. Guests who enter through the eastern approach spend 40 minutes longer on-site than guests who arrive at the Zone 1 boundary directly. 40 minutes of additional time, at current average spend per minute across the complex, is worth more than the opportunity cost of 6 hectares of park. Toru looked at the numbers she produced to support this. Then he looked at me. She's right, he said. Bariki had been silent through the whole presentation. Now he leaned forward slightly. The gateway structures, he said to Reiko. The threshold at the eastern boundary. How tall? 18 meters. Visible from the highway. From how far? At the highway alignment, first visibility at approximately 4 kilometers. Bariki sat back. 4 kilometers. You see the gateway. You turn off the highway. You experience the sequence. He paused. You've designed a destination that begins to work on people before they arrive. That's the intention, Reiko said. I've been in this industry for 30 years, Bariki said. I've never seen an arrival sequence designed at this scale for a private development. Nobody has had the land for it, Reiko said simply. I approved the full design that afternoon. Construction phasing to begin as soon as the Zone 3 infrastructure grid reached the eastern section. Reiko would remain on-site through the development phase as design authority. The Zone 3 structures broke ground over the following 3 months in overlapping phases. Minda's Tower in the north, foundation piles going in, the deep ones Toru had approved. Fumio's Promenade extension to the south, running parallel to the Zone 2 boundary, the same surface material, the same lighting specification, continuous. Reiko's Boulevard and Gateway in the east, the 2 threshold structures rising simultaneously, the boulevard landscape treatment being installed section by section, working inward from the boundary. The Garden District came last in the eastern sequence, which was deliberate. Reiko wanted the boulevard and gateway complete before the Garden District began, so the spatial logic of the approach could be read in full before the softer elements were added. Toru ran 4 concurrent construction operations for the first time. He hired a 4th site manager and restructured his reporting accordingly. The weekly reports became 2 pages for the first time since the casino build, which I noted without comment, and he clearly considered a temporary and regrettable necessity. The one-pass system expanded across Zone 3 simultaneously. The infrastructure laid during groundwork, the reader points installed as structures were completed, the coverage map growing weekly. Ayako had negotiated the Zone 3 technology integration with the existing system provider 6 months earlier, anticipating the need, which I had not asked her to do, but which she considered within her defined scope as general counsel. You negotiate procurement contracts now? I asked, when she mentioned it. You needed it done, she said. My scope is protecting the company's legal and commercial position. A technology integration negotiated poorly costs more over 10 years than any single legal dispute I'm likely to manage. I could not argue with that logic. I had stopped trying to argue with Ayako on matters within her defined scope some time ago. 12 months into Zone 3 development, the site crossed a threshold that the system marked with a notification different in character from any previous one. Not an objective completion. Not an objective unlock. A single line, site status, integrated entertainment destination. Combined operational zones 1 and 2. Zone 3 development at 60% completion. Total site 240 hectares. This site is now operating at a scale with no regional comparison point. The nearest comparable destination by combined metric is 340 kilometers from this location. I read it twice. Then I want to find Toru. He was at the Zone 3 eastern section, watching the gateway structures. Both threshold buildings were complete. 18 meters, the specific material finish Reiko had specified, the proportions she had calculated to be visible from 4 kilometers without appearing oversized at the point of arrival. They stood at the eastern boundary in the early afternoon light, flanking the boulevard that stretched 800 meters westward into the development. Nothing yet connected them to the complete complex. The boulevard ran inward and ended at the Garden District under construction. But standing at the threshold and looking west, you could see the Zone 1 casino tower at the far end of the site, the Aquapark roofline, the upper floors of Minda's Tower under construction to the north. 240 hectares. In the middle distance, at the far end of 800 meters of approach road, a city. The system sent a notification. I said, it says there's no regional comparison point. Nearest comparable is 340 kilometers. Toru looked at the gateway structures, then at the boulevard, then at the site behind it. 340 kilometers, he said. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Your father bought 10 hectares for a farm. I know. You built 340 kilometers of buffer zone around a farm. I looked at him. He was not quite smiling. Toru didn't quite smile, but something in his expression was different from its usual working configuration. How long until the boulevard is complete? I asked. Garden District opens in 9 weeks. Full Eastern Approach sequence operational in 14. And the whole Zone 3? Mendes Tower, 8 months. Promenade Extension, done in 6 weeks. Eastern Sequence, 14 weeks. Remaining Zone 3 structures. He paused, consulting something internal. 18 months for the full complement. 18 months. The system had a new notification waiting when I checked it that evening. Objective 9 unlocked. Final phase. Zone 3 completion. Structures remaining. Luxury Hotel Tier 2. Zone 3 Entertainment District. Zone 3 Waterfront Extension. Additional FNB complement. Parallel objective. Brand formalization. The site requires a unified identity at this scale. A name, a visual language, a guest experience standard that applies consistently across all 3 zones and all 26 current operational venues. Note, you have been operating this site for 3 years and 2 months. You have not named it. I looked at that last line for a long time. It was correct. The complex had grown from a casino on farmland to a 240-hectare integrated destination, and at no point had I stopped to give it a name. The casino had a name. It was on the license. The hotel had Shinji's brand. The clubs had their individual names. The aquapark had signage. The one-pass system had its own identity. The site itself had no name. I thought about what it was, what it had become, what my father had given me the land for, and what had grown from it, and what it was going to be when the last of Zone 3 was complete. Everything that gives people pleasure and takes their money. That was the system's description. It was accurate, but it was operational logic, not identity. A name meant something different. A name was what the place was when you weren't describing its revenue model. I thought about Kikuchi, who had sold his land because the new thing being built on it was still recognizably connected to the idea of tending something. I thought about Toru's phrase, standing at the gateway structures that afternoon. You built 340 kilometers of buffer zone around a farm. I thought about my father, who had known what land was worth and had given it to the wrong son at exactly the right moment. I wrote a single word on the notepad on my desk, looked at it, wrote it again. Then I called Ayako and told her to begin the trademark process. The word on the notepad was Yamamoto. Not the casino, not the complex, not the destination. The full site, all 240 hectares of it, carrying the name of the man who had bought 10 hectares of flat land near a highway because he understood what good land near a road was worth, and who had given it to his son in a hospital room with the instruction to build something real. Ayako had the trademark application filed within a week. She came to the site office afterward and set the filing confirmation on my desk without comment. Then, after a pause that was unusual for her, she said, "It's the right name." She left before I could respond, which was also unusual for her. I told no one else until the brand presentation 3 weeks later. Reiko had been engaged to develop the visual identity, not because urban designers typically did brand work, but because she had spent 5 days understanding what the site was before she drew a single line. And that quality of prior understanding was exactly what a name needed to be carried correctly into a visual language. Her presentation was a single board. The name, in a typeface she had commissioned from a type designer she worked with regularly. The logic of the typeface, why the proportions were what they were, how it read at the scale of a gateway structure, how it read at the scale of a matchbook, how it would look on the promenade lighting columns, on the airport terminal fascia, on the one-pass card carried in a guest's wallet. Below the name, in smaller text, the line she proposed, where pleasure is the only currency. I read it twice. Then I looked at Reiko. The system's description was everything that gives people pleasure and takes their money, I said. I know. I found it in your original planning documents. She paused. That's the operational logic. What I've written is the guest experience of the same idea. They're not being taken from. They're spending on the thing they want most. She looked at the board. There's a difference between those two things, even if the revenue is identical. I thought about that for a moment. She was right, in the way that the best people in any room were right, not arguing with the previous idea, but showing it from the angle that made it complete. The name and the line, I said. Both approved. Apply them across the full site. The Yamamoto rollout took 4 months. Every surface that carried a venue name now also carried the site name above it. Every piece of guest-facing material. Every vehicle in the ground transport fleet. The airport terminal fascia, the promenade lighting columns, the gateway threshold structures at the Eastern Zone 3 boundary. The effect was incremental and then sudden, the way large changes in complex systems tend to work. Nothing visible for weeks, and then, on a specific day, a guest arriving at the Eastern Gateway, seeing Yamamoto in 18 meters of illuminated letterforms flanking the boulevard, would understand for the first time that they were entering a place with a name. Not a casino, not a resort, not an entertainment complex. A place. Zone 3 completed in stages over the following 18 months. Mendes Tower opened first. 32 floors. 1,040 rooms, which made it the largest hotel on the site by a significant margin and the largest hotel in the region by a margin that the regional hospitality press covered with more enthusiasm than I had anticipated. Mende came for the opening. He stood in the lobby of his tower, his design, his capital, his operator, and looked at it with the expression of someone seeing something they built for the first time after it became real. I recognized the expression. I had worn it myself, 3 years earlier, standing at the edge of a casino floor on opening night. You should have insisted on equity, he said to me, in the lobby. I offered you the choice, I said. I know. He looked at the lobby. I made the right choice. He paused. I'm also saying you should have been harder about taking equity. You left value on the table. I got a tower I didn't have to fund and a developer who had a reason to build it well, I said. That's not leaving value on the table. He looked at me sideways. No, it isn't. He said it in the tone of someone updating a prior assessment. I underestimated what you were building when I bought those parcels. I thought I was positioning against a regional entertainment complex. I didn't understand the scale. Nobody did, I said, including me, at the beginning. He accepted that. We watched the lobby fill with the first guests, hotel guests, not casino guests, a different demographic, quieter, the kind who had arrived from the airport in the Kodama ground transfer and would spend 3 nights, use the spa twice, eat at Yoshida's restaurant, take the boat to Yukio on the second evening. Guests who experienced the whole site across multiple days rather than a single night. The system had called them the highest value segment. Average 3-day spend, across all venues, was $11,000 per couple. Mende watched them for a moment. Then, when does Zone 4 start? I looked at him. There's no Zone 4 yet. But there will be. I didn't answer. He nodded as if I had. The promenade extension opened 6 weeks after the tower, connecting Zone 2's existing 4 kilometers to Zone 3's southern boundary, and then continuing for another 2 kilometers along the new waterfront created by the Zone 3 development. 6 kilometers of continuous promenade. The full length took 45 minutes to walk at a relaxed pace. Fumio managed the opening with the operational precision that had become his defining characteristic. Not the showmanship of Saito, not the technical authority of Toru, but a specific, reliable competence that meant the operational details of a major venue opening were simply handled. He sent me a message the morning of opening day. All systems ready. Guest flow tested. Staff briefed. F&B confirmed. Open at 11. I replied, good work. His reply, standard. He had, I thought, the right relationship to his own competence. The eastern arrival sequence reached full operation 2 months after the promenade extension. The garden district opened, 6 hectares of curated landscape. The pavilions designed by a firm Reiko had selected, the botanical component developed in consultation with a specialist she had brought in from Kyoto. The paths and the planting and the low-scale hospitality working together to create the thing she had described in the original presentation, a place to exhale. On the first weekend of full operation, a family, 2 adults, 3 children, arrived at the Eastern Gateway at 10 in the morning. I watched them on the camera feed from the site operations center that Fumio had built into the Zone 3 Eastern management infrastructure. They drove through the gateway, parked, and walked the boulevard. Stopped at the garden district. The children ran ahead on the paths. The adults sat at a pavilion and ordered coffee. They stayed in the garden district for 40 minutes. Then they walked the Reveal Plaza, saw the full site for the first time, and continued to the promenade. By midday, they were at the Aqua Park. 7 hours and 50 minutes later, they departed through the Eastern Gateway. The exit survey they completed flagged the garden district as the highlight of the day. 6 hectares of park that generated no primary ticket revenue. Reiko's note, when I forwarded her the survey data. The exhale is the memory. The memory is the reason they return. The last Zone 3 structures completed over the following 6 months, sequenced by Toru with the methodical patience that had characterized every phase of the construction. The Zone 3 Entertainment District, a cluster of mid-scale venues in the Western Zone 3 section, connecting to the existing Zone 2 Club Promenade and extending the evening entertainment footprint of the site. Saito had designed the program before the buildings were finished, which meant the first booking confirmations went out while the fit-out was still underway. 3 of the 7 venues in the district had full opening night reservations before their licenses were issued. Ayako had timed the license applications accordingly. The Zone 3 waterfront extension, additional beach zones, 2 new food and beverage pavilions, a water sports facility that the system had specified, and that Fumio had managed the tender process for while Toru was focused on the entertainment district construction. The additional FNB complement, 4 new concepts, 2 of which Yoshida had proposed and 2 of which came from the system's analysis of guest spend data. One of the system's suggestions was a late-night ramen concept, open until 6 in the morning, positioned between the casino and the Zone 2 Club Promenade. Yoshida had initially resisted it on quality grounds. I asked him to look at the midnight to 4 spend data from the existing street food hall. He looked at it, was quiet for a moment, and said he would run it himself. It became the highest visited food venue on the site within 3 months of opening. Yoshida said nothing about this to anyone, which was his way of acknowledging that he had been wrong. Zone 3 completion was not a single day. There was no opening ceremony for Zone 3 itself. It had been opening in pieces for 18 months, each section becoming operational as it was ready, the site absorbing each addition without pause. Toru sent me the final construction completion report on a Tuesday morning, 3.5 years after the casino foundation had been poured, in the same format as every weekly report he had ever written. 1 page, specific numbers, no narrative. Final line. All Zone 3 structures complete. Site construction phase concluded. Ongoing. Routine maintenance and planned capital works only. I read it and sat with it for a while. 3.5 years. 31 operational venues. 240 hectares. A name on the gateway structures visible from 4 kilometers. The month the final Zone 3 structures opened, the combined site figures came in at numbers that required me to read them twice to be certain the decimal points were in the right positions. Yamamoto, combined monthly operating summary. Zone 1, Casino, Hotel X2, Spa X2, Racing Facility, Arena, Restaurants X6. Gross revenue, $52,400,000. Zone 2, C, Promenade, Clubs X5, Airport, Aquapark, Beach Zones. Gross revenue, $18,700,000. Zone 3, Hotel Tower, Minda, Entertainment District, Promenade Extension, Waterfront, Arrival Sequence, F&B Complement. Gross revenue, $24,100,000. Combined gross, $95,200,000. Net operating income, $41,300,000. $41.3 million. Net, monthly, annualized, $495 million. The system updated. Site status, Yamamoto, fully operational. Zones 1, 2, 3, complete. Total venues, 31. Total land, 240 hectares. Monthly NOI, $41,300,000. Annualized NOI, $495,600,000. No regional comparison. International comparison tier, top 8 integrated entertainment destinations globally. The evening the final numbers came in, I walked the full site. Not in a car, on foot, from the eastern gateway to the western edge of Zone 1, taking the route a guest arriving for the first time would take if they followed the sequence Reiko had designed. The gateway at dusk, the Yamamoto letterforms lit against the darkening sky. The boulevard, the canopy filtering the last of the light. The garden district, the evening crowd different from the daytime families. Couples, quieter, the pavilions doing a different kind of service. The reveal plaza, and then the view opening in front of me. The casino tower, the hotel, the arc of the promenade, the sea catching the last light, the aquapark dark against the southern skyline, the arena marquee lit for a Friday night event, Minda's tower rising above everything to the north. 6 kilometers of promenade. 45 minutes at walking pace. The sea on my right for most of it. Yukio's platform visible in the middle distance, lit and occupied. Sato's programming audible at intervals. Henna's kitchen operating. The Zone 3 entertainment district beginning its evening cycle to the west. I walked until I reached the southern end of the Zone 3 extension, where the promenade ended and the site boundary ran down to the perimeter fence. Beyond the fence, in the dark, was land. Fields, mostly. A road at the far edge. And beyond that, more land, in every direction. I stood at the fence for a while. I thought about my father. The hospital room. The folder of documents. 10 hectares. Start something. I thought about Toru at the eastern gateway. You built 340 kilometers of buffer zone around a farm. I thought about Kikuchi in his vegetable plot, not wanting to stop being useful. About Fumio, who came to sell land and stayed to build something. About Bariki, who spent 3 years trying to acquire the original parcel and ended up with a board seat in what grew from it. About Ruji, whose Thursday evening numbers had been declining when I walked into his club and told him a number that was precisely correct. About Hayato, whose name was on a lounge door in a casino that had become the anchor of a 240-hectare destination for 3% of One Wing's revenue and a letter of introduction he'd written on the second day of all of this. I took out my phone and opened the system notification that had been waiting since that morning. Yamamoto, Phase 1 complete. Current site, 240 hectares, 31 venues. Monthly NOI, $41,300,000. International tier, top 8. You have built a destination. Phase 2 recommendation, scale. Not a new zone. Not additional hectares on the current site. A second site. The system has identified 3 candidate locations globally. Analysis attached. The methodology used to build Yamamoto is transferable. The knowledge, the team, the operational systems, the brand, all of it moves. The question is no longer how large this site can become. The question is how many sites there can be. Recommended first location, attached. I looked at the notification for a long time. Then I looked at the dark land beyond the fence. Then I called Toru. He picked up on the second ring. The system has a new objective, I said. A pause. How large? Global. Silence. Longer than his usual silences. I'll need a bigger crew, he said. He hung up. I put the phone in my pocket. The fence was in front of me. Beyond it, the dark land. Beyond that, a world that did not yet have a second Yamamoto in it. Not yet. 3.5 years ago, a man in a hospital room handed me a folder and said, start something. He didn't say stop.